Hello universe, tonight we stand at the lip of a world before names, where mountains have not yet chosen which way to lean, and the sea breathes like a vast animal asleep beneath the crust of the earth. The sky above you isn't quite black, it's a deep indigo cloth pricked with scattered, tentative stars, as if the cosmos is still testing the idea of light. You hear a hush that isn't silence, more like the slow rumble that hides under the skin of the world, the way a conch shell remembers the tide. The air tastes of cold stone and damp soil. There's a metallic tang at the back of your tongue, like the edge of a blade that has not yet learned its purpose. Your fingers graze the wall of a cavern, smooth where water has caressed it for ages, rough where time has snapped its patience. The smell of crushed moss and distant salt hangs steady. When you breathe in deeply, your own chest rises out of sync with the deep heartbeat of the earth. That pulse is older than language, older than even fear. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing in the Titan Age, a time when gods are not yet the neat marble statues that poets will later imagine, but towering forces of nature with the smell of iron in their breath. The land is raw, untamed, not yet dressed in the tidy seasons you know. The cliffs jut upward like the shoulders of sleeping giants. The ocean breathes fog into your face, and each wave breaks like a heavy door closing somewhere far away. Beneath all this, a seed of fate has already been planted. You can't see it, but you can feel it in the way the wind shifts, sharp with resin one moment, dull with ash the next. Somewhere, an old power sits on a throne made of hours, staring into the faces of his children and seeing not their beauty, but the knife edge of a prophecy. It is a prophecy so simple it's cruel. As the Father did to the Son, so shall the Son do to the Father. Historians still argue whether the Greeks intended Kronos and Kronos to be the same being, one a titan, the other the personification of time itself, or whether later storytellers simply merged two fears into a single name. Time and tyranny do, after all, feel uncomfortably similar when you're trapped under either. Kronos, the Sky Father, is not a gentle ruler. His reign is not kept by the loyalty of love, but by the habit of fear. Each sunrise feels rehearsed, each sunset a signature on a contract nobody dared read before signing. And beneath his polished rule is the gnawing knowledge that he came to power by overthrowing his own father, Uranus. That seed of treachery, once planted, grows everywhere, even in the dark cradles of his own offspring. Rhea, the Titaness queen, has learned to measure her days in whispers and glances, not hours. She has borne children to Kronos, each one a living question mark in a household that cannot tolerate questions. One by one, each infant is lifted into Kronos' shadow and swallowed whole. There is no blood, no violence in the way mortals understand it, only the cold efficiency of erasure. The god who governs time knows exactly how to remove the future. You eat it before it grows teeth. Imagine if every clock you ever owned simply devoured the next second before you could live it. That's the kind of hunger Kronos carries. The cries of the newborn fade too quickly, replaced by an unnerving silence. It is a silence that collects in the corners of the palace like dust, heavy and waiting. Rhea's grief does not explode, it seeps. She smiles less, speaks less, and walks the halls as though she is a shadow following herself. Yet behind her stillness, there is calculation. One night, she delivers a child not into her husband's waiting hands, but into a plan. She swaddles a stone in soft cloth, binding it as carefully as she would a real infant. The stone is cold, but Rhea's hands are warm with the last traces of the birth. When Kronos comes, she hands him the bundle without meeting his eyes. He swallows it without suspicion, without ceremony. Power rarely questions what it believes it already owns. The real child, Zeus, is spirited away, small as a whispered syllable, to a hidden cave on the island of Crete. There, the air smells of goat's milk and wet earth. Water drips from the ceiling in slow, steady notes. The cave's guardians, the Curetes, perform their noisy dance outside, clashing bronze shields to mask the cries of the infant from the all-hearing ears of Kronos. The sound is harsh, metallic, almost comical in its rhythm, but it works. Sometimes survival is nothing more than loud enough camouflage. One evening, you follow the path into that cave. It is darker than you expect, yet not empty dark. There is a hum here, the kind that lives in the bones of mountains. Amalthea, the divine goat, leans over the infant, her breath warm and steady. Zeus's eyes, still clouded with newborn haze, seem to follow the shadows as though they are friends. You crouch beside him, and for a heartbeat, his tiny pulse matches the deep, slow rhythm you felt in the earth earlier. It's the first and perhaps last time the heart of a god will beat in perfect sync with the world. Outside, the wind carries a faint metallic scent again. You know this smell now. It means Kronos is near, or at least his attention is. The Curetes dance louder. Somewhere in the palace far away, Kronos sits with a satisfied smile, unaware that the prophecy he fears is already alive and breathing. The stone he swallowed will one day be set at Delphi, the Omphalos, navel of the world, where pilgrims will come to touch the smooth surface and whisper prayers. Few will remember that it was once a trick, a decoy. Fewer still will realize that sometimes the most sacred objects begin life as a lie. You step back from the infant, careful not to let your shadow fall across his face. The mountain exhales, and with it, you hear something like a promise. Low, patient, inevitable. The boy will grow. The boy will return. And when he does, the taste of stone will come back to Kronos' throat, sharper than the day he swallowed it. Your path from the cave leads upward, back into the starlit night. The constellations seem brighter now, as if they know their roles in the story to come. Somewhere in the darkness, the prophecy stirs again, and the next step in the tale is already waiting for you. You still feel it. That heartbeat from the cave hasn't left you. It follows you like an echo stitched into your bones. It's not loud, it's steady, patient, and stubborn, the kind of rhythm you notice only when the world around you is too still. You carry it up the jagged path, up through the thin night air where stars sharpen into silver needles. Behind you, the mouth of the cave shrinks into darkness, and somewhere within, the child sleeps, small enough to hide in the folds of fate itself. But fate never stays folded for long. The wind changes. The scent of goat's milk and wet stone fades, replaced by something heavier, burnt cedar, iron dust, and the faint bitterness of storm clouds that haven't yet found their rain. You know this smell. It belongs to the center of the world's control, a place where every hour is measured and guarded, the throne hall of Kronos. The palace of the Sky Father is not built so much as grown. Its foundations rise from the living rock, shaped by hands that remember how to command mountains. Walls soar upward into shadows. You can't see their full height because the air near the ceiling is too thick with heat and memory. The floor beneath you is polished obsidian, smooth enough to catch reflections that are never entirely yours. Here, even your shadow doesn't fully belong to you. Along the walls, relief carvings tell a story that was never meant to be forgotten. The fall of Uranus, the blood on the earth, the sickle raised high in Kronos' hand. Historians still argue whether the sickle was an actual weapon or a poetic invention, a symbol of severing heaven from earth. In the carvings, though, it is heavy enough to hurt your wrists just looking at it. The hall smells of permanence. Not safety, permanence. Every torch burns with a flame that leans neither left nor right, as if the air itself fears imbalance. And on the throne at the far end, Kronos sits like a weight that the world has agreed to carry. He is not idle. His eyes roam slowly, as though searching for cracks in the very air. His fingers rest on the throne's arms, curling just enough to remind you that they could crush stone into sand. Time is his ally, his disguise, and his weapon. But time is also the one thing he can never stop from moving forward. Kronos believes he has secured his rule. The stone swaddled in cloth rests inside him, silent and unthreatening. He imagines it to be the body of his last child, the one that should have completed his cycle of control. He sleeps easier now, or at least pretends to. The lie sits comfortably in his stomach, warming him like a false hearth. The most dangerous lies are the ones you want to believe. His days are a ritual of observation. He measures the sun's climb, the moon's descent, the patterns of wind across the sea. Every detail feeds his need to predict and control. Outside his awareness, or perhaps just beyond his willingness to admit, a child's heartbeat in a hidden cave beats in defiance of these rhythms. Beyond the palace walls, the natural order limps. There is no graceful turn from spring to summer, no gentle fade into autumn. Instead, the seasons lurch forward like a cart with one broken wheel. Farmers mutter about crops that ripen too soon, then rot before they can be harvested. Fishermen tell of seas that forget to swell, as though the tides themselves are afraid to rise without permission. And yet, Kronos sees no reason to change. Control, to him, is not about harmony. It is about sameness. So long as every hour is his, the shape of those hours doesn't matter. The remaining children of Rhea live in a strange, suspended twilight inside him. They are not gone in the way mortals die, nor alive in the way mortals live. They exist in pause. Their dreams, if they have any, are muted, blurred into the slow drift of swallowed time. Kronos is not just the god of time, he is the god of postponement. You imagine what it must be like inside that prison. No light, no dark, just an endless, lukewarm now. Perhaps they hear each other's heartbeats, perhaps they don't. Perhaps they've stopped needing them. And in that quiet, the prophecy curls like smoke, waiting for a crack to slip through. It happens in the evening, when the last of the day's light spills into the hall like thin honey. The torches burn steady, the air hangs heavy, and Kronos leans back into the throne's weight. Then, a tremor. Barely enough to stir the torchlight, but you feel it under your feet. It is the same rhythm you felt in the cave. Faint, distant, but undeniable. The heartbeat of Zeus, reaching across the miles, finding the exact stones that hold up the Skyfather's seat. Kronos pauses. His eyes sharpen. His fingers curl tighter against the throne's arms. He says nothing. Perhaps he felt it and dismissed it as the settling of the palace foundations. Perhaps he recognized it and decided to ignore it, because admitting it would mean acknowledging that the stone he swallowed was not a child, and the child he did not swallow still lives. Sometimes the mind refuses to name the thing the body already fears. You step closer to the carvings along the walls. The story there hasn't changed, but under the flicker of torchlight, you notice new cracks along the seams, hairline fractures in the stone. They run through the image of Uranus falling, through the raised sickle, through the triumphant stance of Kronos. The scent of burnt cedar thickens, and now it's joined by something sharper. Pine resin, perhaps, or the high-altitude cold of distant mountains. It smells like the outside world, the one Kronos has worked so hard to seal himself away from. A draft moves through the hall, though the doors are shut. It brushes your skin, cool and steady, carrying with it the faintest sound, a distant clash of bronze. You know that rhythm. The Curites are still dancing their shielded dance in Crete, still masking the cries of a child who will one day make this hall shake for Real. Kronos believes himself untouchable, but you can see the chains even if he cannot. They are not made of metal. They are forged from the prophecy, from the choices he has already made, from the simple truth that nothing, no king, no god, no titan, can rule forever. The higher the throne, the longer the fall's shadow. Every law he enforces, every command he issues, is a link in the chain that will eventually pull him down. He watches the sky for signs of rebellion, but forgets to watch his own hands. The very act of holding too tightly will cost him what he fears to lose. You leave the hall, stepping out into the cold air. The scent of cedar still lingers, but now it's softer, mingled with the sharper breath of high ridges. The sky has darkened into a deep violet, and the first stars are beginning to thread themselves into constellations. The heartbeat follows you again, not louder, but clearer, as if distance has taught it precision. Chains can bind a skyfather for a long time, but not forever. Somewhere below the horizon, the boy grows. Somewhere above it, the prophecy waits like a storm cloud deciding when to break. And you, standing between them, feel the first drops. You carry the sound with you still, steady, unhurried, the heartbeat of the child in the cave. It hums under your skin like a reminder you can't set down. When you close your eyes, you see not his face. He is too young for that, but the stone. Cold, heavy, wrapped in cloth soft enough to fool a god who never thought to check. The stone is a strange sort of hero in this story. It will never grow, never speak, never dream. And yet, it has already saved a life. It has already tricked a king. Sometimes, the smallest act of deception can become the cornerstone of a legend. The memory comes to you in pieces, like light through the slats of a half-closed shutter. Rhea's face, pale with exhaustion but sharpened with resolve. The smell of pine resin from the birthing chamber. The weight of the newborn in her arms, a weight that feels fragile and infinite all at once. She had already lost too much. 5 children taken, swallowed, their voices smothered before they could even form words. And she had watched each loss not with a cry, but with a calculation, waiting for the moment when calculation would become action. This time, she refused to give Kronos the truth. She wrapped the child quickly, passed him into the hands of those she trusted, and turned her attention to the object that would take his place. It was not just any stone. It came from the slopes of Mount Ida, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain, dense enough to match the weight of a newborn. She swaddled it in soft wool, tied the cloth with the same knot she used for her children, and held it close until its chill no longer startled her. In that moment, the stone stopped being a rock, it became a story. Kronos entered as he always did, slow, deliberate, a presence that filled the room before his voice did. His eyes scanned the chamber not in warmth but in assessment, as though the very walls might betray him if they shifted in the wrong light. Rhea held out the bundle without meeting his gaze. The cloth was warm from her hands. The stone inside had taken on just enough of that warmth to pass. Kronos took it with the same indifference he had shown to the others, lifted it slightly as though weighing it, then opened his mouth. There was no hesitation, no suspicion. He swallowed it whole. The act was swift, almost casual, like a man tossing away a fruit pit. When it was done, he turned and left. Sometimes victory arrives not with a cheer, but with the absence of disaster. The real child, Zeus, was already on his way to safety. The path to the cave wound through cedar groves and rocky slopes, the air thick with the scent of wild thyme and damp stone. His carriers, swift-footed and silent, knew the terrain well. They avoided the main trails, keeping to shadowed ridges where the moonlight barely reached. Every so often, an owl's call would break the quiet, and they would pause, listening, not for the owl, but for the absence of anything else. Silence, in a world ruled by Kronos, was rarely a good sign. At last, they reached the mouth of the cave. The air there was cooler, the smell of the sea faint but present. Inside, the Curetes were already gathered, their bronze shields polished to a muted glow. They began their dance at once, stamping and clashing to mask the child's cries. The sound was strange, too rhythmic for chaos, too chaotic for music, but it worked. Far away, inside the stomach of Kronos, the stone rested in darkness. It did not dissolve, did not fade. It sat there like an anchor, a reminder that not everything inside him belonged to him. One day it would come out, not through destruction, but through liberation. When that day came, it would be set at Delphi, the Omphalos, the navel of the world. Pilgrims would touch its smooth surface, believing it to be the center of all things. Few would remember its origin. Fewer still would know it began its story as a trick. Historians still debate whether the Omphalos stone displayed at Delphi in later centuries was the stone Kronos swallowed or a ceremonial replica. But in myth, replicas don't matter. The story is what survives, and the story says the stone was real. In time, even a lie can become a sacred truth. Kronos returned to his throne feeling lighter, though he could not have explained why. He believed the prophecy had been disarmed. In his mind, the chain that had linked his own betrayal of Uranus to a future betrayal by his son had been broken. But the chain was still there. Only now, it was stretched across distance and hidden in shadow. He did not notice the difference in the air, the faint shift in the wind patterns that the more attentive gods whispered about. He did not notice the Curetes' dance echoing faintly in the earth beneath his palace. He certainly did not notice that the seasons had begun to breathe more evenly, as though the world itself had been holding its breath for the birth of the child. The greatest danger to a ruler is not the enemy at the gates, it's the one they no longer bother to look for. Back in Crete, the cave had settled into a rhythm. The goats grazed near the entrance, their bells chiming softly. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, deliberate notes. Zeus slept, woke, cried, and slept again. His small hands curled and uncurled as though testing the idea of holding onto something. The heartbeat was still there, matching the deep pulse of the mountain. You could stand at the cave's entrance and feel both at once, the child's life and the earth's life, braided together in a way that felt unbreakable. You leave the cave once more, the scent of thyme and salt still in your lungs. Behind you, the child sleeps, the stone lies silent in a stomach far away, and the prophecy continues to hum in the spaces between them. The path ahead is not straight. It twists through valleys where shadows hold their own counsel, over ridges where the wind tells you things you can't yet understand. Somewhere in the distance, you can almost hear the first murmurs of war. The stone has done its work for now. The child's time will come, and the Skyfather, chained by his own certainty, has no idea how close the end has already come to him. You notice it before the wind does. The heartbeat. It's the same one you've been carrying since the cave, but now it has changed. It no longer feels like the soft tap of rain on a leaf. It has weight, depth, and an undercurrent of urgency. Somewhere far away, the child is no longer just a child. The cave has shaped him, fed him, hidden him, and now it is releasing him into the world's bloodstream. The prophecy rides with it. What once whispered like a stray thread of air through pine needles now hums like a taut string, vibrating against the bones of the earth. The tone is lower, steadier. Not a warning anymore, but a promise. Even the sky has a breaking point. The signs are small at first. You could miss them if you weren't listening in the right way. Clouds form over the open sea in shapes unfamiliar to the old fishermen, twisting coils, strange rings, patterns that refuse to disperse. Birds arrive weeks earlier than they should, flocking over coastlines like scribbles written in black ink across a pale blue page. In the mountains, streams flood without rain. In the lowlands, soil dries out even while the morning dew still clings to the grass. The mortals notice first, they always do. A fisherman tells another that the moon is pulling the tides too far. Farmers murmur about wheat that ripens too fast and spoils before the harvest. They speak softly, not from ignorance, but from instinct. When the world acts strangely, you don't shout. You listen. In the halls of the Titans, these things are dismissed. Seasonal anomalies, the courtiers call them. Cycles, the scribes write in the long scrolls. But the world is not cycling. It is shifting. Historians still argue whether the great Titanomachy began in a single day or grew from years of slow unrest. Some claim Zeus appeared one morning at the gates of Kronos' power, fully grown, fully armed, ready to strike. Others say it began as all revolutions do, long before the first blow, with small fractures in the foundations. You feel the cracks forming under your feet. Kronos still believes he has broken the chain of fate. The stone in his belly sits cold and inert, convincing him he has devoured the last of his threats. He goes about his days in the slow certainty of a man who believes he's solved his only problem. His throne room feels no different to him, but to you it smells faintly altered, less cedar, more stone dust. The torches burn the same, yet their light reaches a little farther into the shadows. The carvings along the walls, scenes of Uranus's fall, seem to bear more hairline fractures than they did before. He notices none of it. Or perhaps he notices and chooses not to notice. That's the thing about rulers who believe themselves immortal. They see no reason to interpret discomfort as danger. The most dangerous silence is the one you pretend not to hear. In the hidden crests of Mount Ida, Zeus grows taller. His steps are surer, his hands stronger. Amalthea still feeds him, though now he spends as much time outside the cave as within. The Curetes keep up their dance, clashing bronze in that strange syncopated rhythm that has become part of the mountain's heartbeat. He learns not just to wield strength but to hide it. He listens to the wind, the way it changes before storms. He studies the paths of deer and the angles of falcon dives. Everything is training. Power is nothing without the patience to aim it. On some nights, when the mountain air is thin and cold, he walks to the edge of the cliff and looks east, toward Mount Othrys, where Kronos sits. He says nothing aloud, but the set of his jaw says he already knows the path his life will take. The war does not start with a declaration. It starts with a quarrel on a wind-swept hillside far from either Olympus or Othrys. A small Titan garrison, little more than a watchtower, finds itself surrounded by strange allies, river spirits, woodland nymphs, and a handful of ancient beings too wild to name. They do not kill. They do not burn. They simply dismantle. Walls are pulled down, the watchtower's great bronze bell thrown into a ravine. When the wind blows through the empty frame, it makes a hollow tone that will ring in the minds of the survivors for years. The news travels faster than the truth. By the time it reaches Kronos' ears, the story has already grown teeth. His counselors speak of isolated incidents, but their eyes shift nervously as they speak. Zeus begins to leave Crete in secret. Not far at first, small forays into the hills, the valleys, the islands beyond. Everywhere he goes, he listens more than he speaks. Some who meet him know instantly who he is. Others see only a tall, watchful stranger. He finds allies in unexpected places, a sea god with long memory, a weather spirit eager for change, a goddess who has grown tired of binding herself to the slow, choking rules of the Titans. From the deep earth, Gaia herself sends whispers up through the roots of ancient trees. From the dark rivers of the underworld, Nyx lets shadows spill further than they should, bringing him messages. Even the stars, on certain nights, seem to hang in patterns not drawn before. When the world itself takes sides, neutrality becomes a myth. The Skyfather's response is not to seek peace, but to tighten his grip. He orders new patrols, new edicts, new punishments for disobedience. The rules are so strict that even loyal followers bristle under them. He thinks he is sealing cracks. In truth, he is widening them. Every decree drives more of the undecided into quiet rebellion. His own brothers and sisters, once allies, begin to question him in private. The fear in their eyes is no longer of his power, but of the instability it has birthed. You find yourself on a high ridge, wind cutting cold against your face. Below, in the wide valley between Mount Othrys and the lesser peaks that will one day be called Olympus, small camps are springing up. Fires flicker against the dark, each one a quiet declaration. We are here. We are ready. Zeus stands among them now, no longer the hidden child, but the leader of an unspoken cause. The heartbeat you have carried since Crete is louder here, not because it has grown, but because it now has an echo. Many echoes from those who will fight beside him. A single heartbeat can be ignored, and armies cannot. Far above, the constellations seem sharper, as though the night sky itself is waiting for the first strike. In the throne room of Mount Othrys, Kronos still sits, still watches, still believes the stone in his belly to be victory incarnate. He cannot feel the shift in the air. He cannot hear the bronze of the Curetes ringing in the wind. He cannot see the valley fires or the eyes watching from the hills. But you can. And you know, when the first blow falls, it will not be the start of war. It will be the release of one that has been building beneath the heavens all along. You hear it before you see it. The heartbeat. It's no longer just in your bones. Now it's in the ground beneath your feet, carried along the fault lines between mountains, whispered up through tree roots, bounced between stone cliffs. It's heavier, older, and joined by others. More heartbeats. Some faint, as if far away, others close, like footfalls approaching. The prophecy, too, has changed its voice again. It doesn't hum anymore, it thrums. You can almost mistake it for the roll of distant thunder, except the sky is clear. No, this isn't weather. This is the sound of chains beginning to break. The end of a reign doesn't begin with silence, it begins with a sound that refuses to stop. The Titanomachy is no longer a whisper in the hills. Armies have formed, though they are not yet the vast tides of battle that poets will later sing about. Skirmishes bloom like sparks in the dark, a river dam torn down, a Titan outpost abandoned in the night, a patrol that never returns. Kronos sits in his hall, pretending the noise outside is too far to matter. His advisors bring him news wrapped in soft words, isolated disturbances, manageable unrest. But the unease in their voices is as sharp as a blade. Even the carved reliefs on the walls seem to lean closer, as if trying to hear what's happening beyond. You can pretend not to hear the thunder, but the lightning will still find you. The myths vary on who comes to Kronos. In some, it is Zeus himself, storm-eyed and already crowned in defiance. In others, it is Metis, the goddess of cunning, arriving not with a sword but with a cup. Tonight, in the version you walk through, it is Metis. She enters the hall without bowing, without waiting for an invitation, her footsteps echoing louder than they should on the polished obsidian floor. She carries a simple vessel, clay, unadorned, smelling faintly of something sharp and bitter. Historians still argue whether this potion was a gift from Gaia or a concoction of Metis's own making. Some insist it was brewed from herbs that grow only in the cracks between worlds. Others claim it was laced with the will of the prophecy itself. Metis calls it a drink of renewal. She says it will make Kronos stronger, swifter, able to crush the rebellion before it blooms. He takes it without question. The greatest traps are the ones you want to step into. It begins as a tightness in his chest, then a tremor in his hands. Kronos' fingers dig into the throne's arms, his knuckles pale against the dark wood. His jaw clenches, his eyes flare, not with fear, not yet, but with the shock of something unfamiliar, loss of control. The air in the hall changes. The torches gutter, not from wind but from the sudden heaviness that settles into the space. A sound rises, low at first, then growing, a deep, guttural surge like a river reversing its course. And then, with a violence that shakes the hall, Kronos retches. They emerge in reverse order of their swallowing. First comes Hestia, coughing but unbroken, eyes wide as they take in the hall they have not seen since infancy. Then Demeter, her hands clutching at the floor as if to confirm it is real. Hera follows, regal even in her disorientation, her gaze locking instantly onto Kronos with a hatred that has waited too long. Next, Hades, silent, steady, his presence colder than the hall's stone. And then, Poseidon, water streaming from his skin though no sea is near, his breath coming in great, sharp pulls. The hall reeks of bile and something older, something like time itself being dragged backward. Liberation isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it smells like the inside of a monster. Last of all comes the stone. Smooth, heavy, wrapped still in the ghost of its swaddling cloth. It rolls across the floor, stopping just short of your feet. Kronos stares at it, and for the first time you see doubt in his eyes. Not fear, not yet, but the cold, hollow recognition of having been tricked. Historians still debate whether this moment was the true start of the Olympian era or merely its prelude. But the stone remembers. It has been in the belly of the sky, felt the pulse of a false victory, and now it rests here, unblinking. Objects don't hold grudges, but they hold stories, and stories can ruin kings. The freed siblings gather around Zeus, who has entered during the chaos. His presence is not loud, he doesn't need it to be. The heartbeat you've carried since Crete is now part of a larger rhythm. 6 strong pulses, each distinct, yet beating toward the same purpose. No one speaks of vengeance directly. It's not necessary. The air itself has already chosen sides. Kronos leans back, pale and shaking, his hands still gripping the throne. He has lost more than children tonight. He has lost the illusion of inevitability. The chains of the prophecy have tightened, not loosened. Métis is gone. The vessel is gone. The taste in his mouth is bitter enough to etch itself into his memory. The freed gods do not linger. They leave the hall not as captives escaping, but as heirs reclaiming. Outside, the night is vast, the stars sharp, the wind electric with what comes next. You step outside with them. The heartbeat is everywhere now. In the ground, in the air, in the way the constellations seem to lean closer. The prophecy no longer needs to speak. It is living, breathing, walking beside you. The war is not over, it has only changed shape. Somewhere behind you, in the shadowed hall, Kronos sits alone with the stone at his feet. He does not move. He cannot. The feast is over. The reckoning has begun. You can tell the difference immediately. When the 6 siblings stepped out of Kronos' shadow, the air was sharp, bright, electric with the scent of pine and stone dust. Most of them inhaled like they'd never tasted air before. Long, deep pulls, greedy for the sky. But not Hades. His breaths are slow, deliberate. It's not the light above that calls to him. It's the pull beneath his feet, a weight in the ground, steady and certain, like a door waiting to be opened. You notice how his gaze drops more often than it rises. His shoulders square not toward Olympus, not toward the sea, but toward the invisible paths that lead down. The prophecy is still here, still humming in the edges of your hearing, but its tone changes when you look at him. It's no longer the pounding war drum of Zeus's ascension or the restless tide in Poseidon's stride. Around Hades, the prophecy lowers its voice. It becomes a deep, resonant note that you feel more than hear, like the earth itself speaking from its oldest chambers. Not everyone freed from a prison runs for the horizon. Some walk straight into the dark. The war with the Titans is still in motion, battles rolling like storms across the land. But this, you realize, is a different kind of claiming. Hades isn't chasing a throne in the sky. He's looking for a kingdom that no one else will even try to take from him, because it scares them. And you, yes, you, are about to follow him there. It happens away from the others, in a makeshift tent lit by a single oil lamp. The air smells of ash and sweat and the faint copper tang of weapons cooling after battle. Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, three brothers who share the same birth, the same captivity, the same liberation. Now they will divide the world. The method is simple. Lots are drawn. No speeches, no boasts, just the scrape of stone tokens in a bronze cup. Zeus pulls the sky, the vault of stars, the clouds, the lightning. Poseidon draws the sea, its endless depths, its shifting power. Hades draws the last lot, the underworld. Some later poets will say it was fate's hand, others that the draw was a formality and Hades chose it willingly. Historians still debate whether this division mirrors political pacts in early Greek history, or whether it's simply the mythic embodiment of the three great realms known to humankind. Hades doesn't flinch. He studies the token in his hand as if it's something alive, then slips it into his belt. His nod is final, not resigned. Sometimes the greatest power is in ruling where no one else dares to go. The entrance is nothing grand, just a cleft in a hillside, half hidden by yew trees whose shadows knot together even at midday. The air spilling from it is cooler than the spring breeze around you, thick with damp earth and a metallic tang like coins pulled from deep water. You follow him in. The slope is gradual at first, then steeper. Light shrinks behind you until it becomes a thin, trembling thread. The floor underfoot changes from soil to stone, then to something harder, the compressed bones of the earth itself. Your footsteps echo, but his do not. Hades moves as though the darkness knows him. The underworld does not open to everyone, it chooses who will enter. The first sound you hear is water. Not the rushing of mountain streams, but a slow, deliberate current. The Styx, black, glassy, reflecting nothing but its own darkness. It is said that even the gods swear their oaths on the Styx, for breaking such a vow means losing the breath of immortality for 9 years. This is not just a river. It is a boundary carved in water, a line that cannot be crossed without cost. Other rivers wait further in, Acheron, Lethe, Phlegethon, Cocytus. Each holds its own law. Each is a thread in the fabric of this place, weaving sorrow, forgetting, fire, and lament into the very landscape. Historians still argue whether these rivers were imagined as literal geography or as symbolic stages of death's passage. Here, in the cool damp air, they are both. In this realm, even the water remembers. The chamber is massive, but it was never built. It was hollowed by time and weight, the ceiling arching like the inside of a great stone lung. Stalactites hang above, glistening in the dim light from unseen fissures. At its center is a broad rise of black basalt. It's not carved into a throne, it is the throne, shaped by the slow patience of the earth. Hades steps up to it and rests his hand on the surface. For the first time since you've followed him, he smiles. Not widely, not warmly, but with the satisfaction of a man who has arrived exactly where he was meant to be. Thrones are not always forged, sometimes they are simply found by the right hands. No herald announces his rule. No crown is placed on his head. Instead, His reign is established in the way the air shifts when he speaks, in the way shadows gather at his feet. He sets his laws. No soul leaves without his consent. No living being enters without paying the price. The ferryman will row only for those who have made the journey properly. The gates will stay shut except by his key. These are not rules of cruelty. They are structure, meant to keep the living and the dead from unraveling into each other's worlds. Without boundaries, even eternity would collapse. When the work is done, Hades sits alone. The air here has its own pulse, a slow, deep thrum that seems to answer the heartbeat you've been carrying since Crete. You realize now that it was never just Zeus's rhythm. It was always all three brothers, sky, sea, and underworld, finding the places where their pulses would echo loudest. The war above is still raging, but here there is a strange peace. The underworld is not chaos. It is order. It is inevitability. You leave the throne room by a path that climbs back toward the surface. The air grows lighter, but something in you resists the ascent, as though part of you has already pledged loyalty here. Hades does not watch you go. His gaze is turned inward, listening to the slow roll of the rivers, as if they are telling him what the future will bring. When the war above ends, he knows, the dead will come here in floods. He will be ready. The underworld is no longer an empty shadow. It has a lord. And lords, once crowned, do not surrender their thrones. You've been in the underworld long enough now to feel its pulse. The rivers keep their quiet conversations, the air moves in slow currents like thought itself, and the black basalt throne seems to breathe with the man who sits upon it. Here, time does not march, it drips. Every moment is heavy enough to stay with you. But today, the weight is different. The air shifts before you even hear the sound. It's subtle, not colder, not warmer, just changed. You catch a scent you've almost forgotten, the sweetness of grain in the sun, the sharp green of freshly torn grass, and underneath it, the shy perfume of blossoms that open only in the day. Sunlight. Real sunlight. Not the ghost light that slips through fissures in the cavern ceiling, but the living light of the surface. The underworld does not receive sunlight by accident. Hades notices too. His gaze turns from the rivers to the faraway gate, as though he can see straight through rock, across miles, into a meadow that blooms in another world. His expression is unreadable, not surprise, not longing, but the stillness of someone who has been waiting for something he did not admit to himself. The prophecy stirs. It does not sound like the war drum it beat for Zeus, nor the slow tide it kept for Poseidon. Around Hades, it becomes a low, inevitable note, a hum that seems to come from the stones. Something approaches, and you will not be the same when it leaves. Not every invasion comes with spears. Some arrive on petals. Far above, where the sun spills gold on the rolling hills, Persephone walks alone. The wind plays with her hair. The grass parts for her steps as though it knows her name. She bends to gather flowers, anemones, violets, irises, and the rare narcissus that tilts its head as if it knows a secret. The earth is warm here, and she feels it in her bare feet, the life of roots and seeds humming beneath her soles. She hums along without realizing it, matching her voice to the silent music of growing things. Historians still argue whether this moment was an ambush or an appointment. In the most famous telling, Hades bursts forth from the earth, seizes her, and carries her below. But older fragments hint at another version, one in which she hears his call in the wind, pauses, and does not run. In that telling, the earth does not open beneath her, she steps toward it. Every story you know has another version that would change everything. The meadow feels endless, and yet, at its center, she finds something strange. A single flower taller than the rest, its petals almost too bright to look at. The narcissus. She reaches for it, and the air thickens. Somewhere deep below, the underworld feels it, a root pulled, a thread loosened. The ground trembles. Not violently, but in a long exhale, as though the earth has been holding its breath. Cracks appear in the soil, and in the hush that follows, you hear it, the heartbeat. The same one you carried from Crete, the same one that matched the rivers of the dead. Only now it's joined by another, lighter but steady, as if answering. The soil splits. Darkness rises like a tide, not a void but a living shadow. It is cold and warm at once, smelling of rain on stone and iron that has never rusted. At its center, Hades. Not the gaunt specter mortals imagine, but a presence of quiet command, the underworld clinging to him like a cloak. The poets will tell you he takes her. Some will say she screams, others that she is silent, stunned. But there are versions, whispered in certain temples, where her eyes meet his and something unspoken passes between them. Not love, not yet. Recognition. Sometimes it's not about who moves first, but who doesn't step back. He offers no words, only an outstretched hand. The shadow behind him is not empty, it is full, rivers glinting, halls carved by time, a throne that waits for someone to sit beside it. She looks at the meadow, then at the dark, and for a moment the world holds both breaths. Whether she takes his hand or he takes her wrist, the result is the same. The ground closes above them. The path down is not straight. They pass through corridors of crystal that catch stray sunlight and shatter it into cold rainbows. They cross caverns where the air smells of copper and echoes with the dripping of unseen springs. In the distance, the murmur of the Styx grows louder, a sound that feels like the memory of an oath. Persephone does not speak. Her eyes follow the shapes in the stone, the way shadows cling to certain walls and avoid others. Hades does not rush her. His stride is steady, unhurried, as though time here is already bending to match their pace. In the underworld, arrival is not an event, it's a process. When they step into the great chamber, the river's hum changes. Shadows gather near the basalt throne, recognizing its master and someone new. Persephone stops before it, her gaze sweeping the hall, the arching stone ribs, the still pools, the faint light from unseen fissures. Hades watches her, but not like a man waiting for gratitude or fear. More like a land watching the rain decide whether to stay. Historians still debate the meaning of her role. Was she a captive bride, a co-ruler, or the embodiment of the seed buried in winter, waiting to rise? In agrarian societies, her descent marked the death of the harvest and her return the birth of spring. Here, it is not death she wears, but balance. A throne is only half a kingdom without someone to share its weight. It happens quietly. A meal offered, bread, fruit, wine. And in the center, a pomegranate split open, its red seeds glistening like drops of solidified sunset. She eats, one seed, 2, 6, depending on which poet you ask. In the oldest stories, she takes them knowingly. In the newer, she is tricked. Either way, the law is clear. Eating the food of the underworld binds you to it. She does not flinch. If she knows the cost, she does not show it. The juice stains her lips, the seeds stain the seasons. Above, the world changes. Grain wilts before it can be cut, flowers wither in the bud, the air cools as though the sun has stepped back. Demeter searches, her grief spread across the land like frost. She will not stop until she has her daughter back, or at least part of her. Below, Persephone begins to walk the halls as if they have always been hers. The rivers keep her reflection, the gates learn her voice. The dead bow when she passes, not out of fear, but because she walks like someone who knows the value of what she sees. Some roots grow stronger in the dark. The agreement will come later. The split year, the months above and below, the cycle that will teach mortals to measure time by loss and return. For now, there is only this, a woman in a hall of shadow and a man who wears the dark like a second skin. You leave the chamber with the sound of 2 heartbeats behind you, one deep as stone, one light as wind over grass. The prophecy hums between them. It no longer speaks of war, but of something more patient, cycles. The flower has met the shadow, and neither will be what they were. You still see the seeds. They gleam like tiny lanterns cupped in Persephone's palm, their skins a lacquer of deep crimson that seems to drink the torchlight and give it back in softer, warmer pulses. The scent rising from them is tart, pomegranate and stone, sharpened by the cool breath of the underworld. When she lifts one to her lips, time itself seems to hesitate, like a curtain hovering before it falls. The juice touches her tongue. Sweetness arrives first, then the clean knife edge of something older than sweetness, a binding. It is not a chain you can hold or a law carved in basalt. It is a vow that dissolves into the blood and beats there, quiet and unbreakable. The rivers hear it. You can tell from the way the Styx lowers its voice, as if to pass the message downstream without letting it echo. The torches along the basalt walls burn steadier. Even the air shifts from chill to a measured cool, as though the hall has adjusted its temperature to match hers. You hear Hades exhale, and it isn't triumph. It's recognition. A kingdom has taken its first breath as a kingdom of 2. You stand a little apart, letting your own breathing soften to match the room. You've learned that in this realm, rushing is a foreign language. Here, things unfold like ink in water, slow, spiraling, inevitable. The prophecy hums somewhere below hearing. It does not say what will happen, it keeps time for what must. Sometimes a whole year hides inside a single bite. You follow the hush as it travels, a sound like velvet drawn over stone. It slips into the vaulted spaces, along the veins of rock, out toward the distant gates. Above, the change will be noticed in leaves and furrows. Below, it's noticed in the cadence of footsteps you can't see, in the way the ferryman's oar lifts and sinks with gentler insistence. The seeds have fallen into the clockwork of the world, and already the gears have begun to turn. You feel the old rule crystallize around you. Food of the underworld binds the eater to the underworld. The law is not shouted, laws here rarely are. They condense, they precipitate, they appear on the tongue like the aftertaste of a story everybody knows. Historians still argue whether the law began as ritual memory, an echo of how agrarian people bury their grain, and whether the myth teaches a contract. What you partake in, partakes in you. You can debate it on market days, you cannot debate it here. Here, a seed is a signature. Persephone doesn't ask what she has signed. She sits with her spine lengthened and her chin relaxed, her eyes steady as torch flame. Her mouth, when it moves, curves more with thought than with speech. If you came looking for panic, you will be disappointed. She studies the hall like a cartographer charting contours, the cool draft that slides from the left corridor, the whispering seam where 2 stones were once one, the slow heartbeat that lives in the floor and answers her own. Hades watches without intruding. He keeps a respectful distance you can measure in breaths, near enough to answer a question before it fully forms, far enough to let the question arrive on its own. The underworld reads him as well as you do. Where he stands, shadows behave. They are not erased, they are arranged. Not every bond is a taking. Some bonds are an belonging. You note a lesser-known detail. The seeds are not counted aloud. Some stories will later say 2, some 4, some 6. Here, the number is kept like a private room in a house. The door closed, the presence felt. You are reminded, this realm resists precision that becomes a cage. In the underworld, truth prefers the shape of a circle to the shape of a box. Above, the air grows hollow. The first to notice are not priests but women in fields, kneeling to gather what will not gather. Wheat silvers, then surrenders. Vines clutch their grapes as if in second thoughts and then drop them, sullen, to the dirt. A shepherd sets his ear to the flank of a ewe and waits for the familiar churn of spring. Hears nothing but the echo of his own patience. You can almost hear Demeter moving. You don't hear her voice, not exactly. You hear torches hissing in temple courtyards, the slap of sandals running across marble at dusk, the dull thud of grain stores inspected and found wanting. She searches caves and market streets, cliff paths and sacred groves. She passes olive trees that have kept their secrets since the first hill learned it was a hill. She does not pass the gates below. Grief has a map, but it doesn't always show every road. In Eleusis, later, they will carry torches in her memory, trace the quiet geometry of waiting and welcome. They will mix barley drink and mint and tell each other that names are stronger than hunger if names are shared. For now, the city is an ache with a harbor. Fishermen look up from coils of nets as if the sky might answer. Farmers test soil in their hands and find, to their surprise, the taste of salt, tears, rainless. Mini-hook number 3. Some winters arrive without snow. They fall like silence. There is, of course, a debate. Scholars will balance papyrus on their knees and argue whether the story was planted to explain the calendar, or the calendar was planted to anchor the story. They will note that fields rest as surely as people do, that crops and hearts both need dormant seasons to keep from cracking, that grief is a season with useful work. They will not agree. You suspect the disagreement is the point. A story this large must be argued over to stay alive. Below, the halls begin to learn Persephone's footsteps. At first they echo like any other, then they develop a particular lilt you can recognize even before the figure turns a corner. She takes her time, attends to corners, pauses at thresholds as if listening for permission that is always granted. She traces the seam where 2 slabs of basalt met eons ago and ran together like cooling ink. She stops at the river's edge and tries the water with the pad of 1 finger. The Styx doesn't bite. It reflects like dark glass and holds, for a moment, the outline of her hand as though the river enjoys the lesson of shape. She begins small ceremonies, not decrees. A hand on the lintel before passing under, a breath placed gently onto a torch, a stone moved a finger width to sit truer against its neighbor. The dead, who are not unkind but simply finished, watch with a grateful curiosity. They bow more easily now, not out of fear, but from the relief of a good appointment. A region is meeting its gardener. Some crowns are not worn, they are answered. Hades, for his part, learns her silences. There is the silence she keeps while remembering, the silence she keeps to be alone among all these companions, the silence that means she has a thought she intends to keep until it ripens. A realm made of boundaries learns another, a boundary of respect. He does not cross it. You can measure his rule by what he does not claim. You hear him before you see him, leather on rock, winged sandals beating a soft weather into the hall. Hermes is what happens when a crossroads puts on a smile. He arrives with the scent of the sun still on his shoulders, with dust from a dozen doorways on his hem. He bows to the lord, to the lady, but not like a courtier. He bows like a messenger who knows the weight of his own neutrality. Zeus has sent him. Not a threat, not yet, but a truth. Demeter's grief is starving the world. Something must be devised. Hermes speaks not with thunder, but with rectangles of plain air cut neatly into sentences. He proposes an arrangement as reasonable as a calendar. Part of the year above, part below. The share will depend on seeds. Again, the number is not named. Again, you feel the door close soft, the room remain full. A good bargain is a bridge that remembers both shores. Hades listens without wincing. If the room tightens, it tightens like a well-tied knot. He says little. When he speaks, he shapes the word return with unusual care, as if it is an antique cup he refuses to chip. Persephone listens as well. She examines the offer not with the eyes of someone cornered, but with the gaze of someone measuring beams before setting a roof. When she nods, the hall nods with her. Even the ferryman's far or lifts at a more confident angle. You sense a lesser-known tradition stir. The belief that what happens here will require teaching above. There will be secret rites, mysteries, they'll call them, where grief is not erased but brought into a pattern a person can walk without drowning. They'll say holiness is a thing you carry in the dark like an ember and share by cupping your hand around it. No one will be forced. That's how power works when it intends to last. She ascends. You go with her, and the air warms in layers, mineral cool to damp loam to tree sap sweet, tree sap to sun-warmed straw. Sound returns in tears as well. The deep vowel of wind in pine, the consonants of insects rehearsing their trades, the vowels of pasture hills moving in their sleep. The world had been holding its breath. It exhales in a green you can hear. Demeter sees her daughter and runs, and the ground nearly leaps. Their embrace is not pretty, it is honest. Arms not, cheeks wet, words missed because the body takes precedence. You stand back and let the reunion carry its own gravity. The prophecy hums, happy to be right in a way that heals more than it rules. Joy is loudest when it returns what never should have been taken. Fields tumble forward by the hour. The first shoots of barley arrive like notes on a staff and then write themselves into him. Olive trees release new silver, fig leaves open like hands ready to help. On the coast, boats heave as if the sea is tickled. In market squares, people look up without knowing why and then begin talking faster and smiling in the middle of sentences. They will attribute this to weather. They will be wrong, but not by much. You note the well-known event anchoring all this. The return of Persephone marks spring, the departure signals autumn's vow. It is a cycle practical minds can live by and soft minds can live inside. That is a good arrangement. It keeps both kinds of minds from loneliness. Seasons teach patience, but bargains teach discipline. When the time comes, Persephone goes back down. It is not the trudging of a prisoner nor the sprint of a lover. It is the pace you use when you have two homes and neither is a compromise. She returns with the smell of hay in her hair and the quiet of cool kitchens in her eyes. The gate greets her like a dog that has learned not to jump, just to lie across your feet and keep you. Below, the rivers adjust their intervals to accompany her steps. You realize the underworld is not immutable. It is a metronome that listens. Torches do not burn brighter, they burn truer. The dead do not smile, they practice something more lasting, composure. Hades places his palm against the basalt and speaks her name, not loudly. Names are not louder for being yelled, they are longer for being kept. Home is where your absence has a shape ready for you. You become aware of another debate old texts will nick themselves over. Was she taken or did she choose? Was the bite a theft or a sacrament? You listen to the world's answer, which is perhaps the only one that matters. When she is above, the world learns abundance without greed. When she is below, the world learns rest without despair. Either way, the lesson arrives like rain you forgot to hope for. Time passes, and ordinances appear, gentle ones, practical as bowls. In the halls, paths are re-swept to curve with human stride rather than divine impatience. Benches are added where nobody asked for benches and then everyone uses them. New niches appear for the small offerings mortals will someday insist on sending down. A ring, a scrap of handwriting, a picked violet pressed flat between rules. A group of shades, women whose hands taught bread to be bread, assemble in a quiet archway and devise a rite for newcomers. A slow sitting, a palm to the ground, a murmur of, "You made it," that means both, "You survived," and, "You have arrived." Persephone endorses it with a nod that is almost a bow. Hades approves the budget, by which he means he approves keeping the hall bare enough that grief has room to breathe. Order is not the opposite of kindness. It is its tool. At the gates, Hermes trains a younger guide in the choreography of arrivals. When to speak, when to offer water, when to stand far enough away that the living do not mistake escort for ownership. The ferryman never smiles, but his frown softens into something you recognize as mercy's older cousin, exactness. News leaks upward, first as rumor at wells, then as song on harvest nights, that the below is not a furnace but a court, not a maw but a mouth speaking careful sentences about boundaries. People will still die. They will do it better. Enough cycles pass for the cycle to stop needing explanation. Children begin to ask not, "Why does winter come?" but, "What will we do with it?" Bakers plan for slower ovens, storytellers polish long tales, lovers learn the art of letters that travel apart and return with fingerprints. The calendar stops being a leash and becomes, if not a friend, then a kindly schedule. You are there the first time a farmer, tired but pleased, says that spring was generous but autumn was fair. He counts his sacks and leaves one open, not out of negligence but gratitude. He has learned that to keep the wheel turning, you must sometimes place your hands not on the spoke that pulls toward plenty, but on the spoke that pulls toward pause. That is a hard lesson. It feels like kindness when you've practiced. Plenty is loud. Balance whispers and wins. The Eleusinian rites settle into their secret choreography. Torches in the dark, barley drink, the old story told again with just enough difference that the heart wakes to the familiar without falling asleep in it. Mystery stops meaning unknown and starts meaning kept, kept safe, kept warm, kept human-sized. Not everything the gods can carry needs to be handed to everybody all at once. Some cups are meant to be sipped in doorways while rain thinks about being rain. You accompany Persephone on a day that begins already halfway between. She walks a ridge where sunlight and shadow share custody, and the ridge does not complain. From here you can see orchards that have learned how to rest without sulking and river meadows that have learned how to work without boasting. She steps with the confidence of someone who has ceased to argue with her own map. On the descent, she names in her head the rooms below that will need attention. The corridor whose draft has a burr in it, the stone that has settled crooked as a poem left half-rhymed, the list of names she promised to remember, not because remembering changes anything, but because remembering is a form of refusal, refusal to reduce a life to its ending. Hades meets her not at the door, but 3 steps inside it. That is the compromise they have made, and they keep it with the ease of people who stopped counting whose turn it was and started counting how often they are glad. He offers his arm. She takes it, not as a guest to a host, but as one pillar to another as they accept that roofs exist. Some stories are not arcs. They are thresholds walked well, again and again. Scholars will keep arguing. Was the underworld always this orderly? Or did the arrival of a queen civilize a necessary wilderness? Did the myth teach farmers to forgive their fields, or did fields teach poets to forgive their myths? Was the seed a trap, a treaty, or a wedding ring small enough to swallow? They will produce compelling proofs and footnotes full of destinations you half want to visit. They will mispronounce at least one god. They will forget to breathe during their best paragraph. You can shake your head at them, or you can be tender. Their work is a kind of devotion. They keep the story from becoming a costume. They demand that the pomegranates stay red with meaning rather than dry into a prop. You don't have to agree with them to benefit from the way they walk around the tail and kick its tires. Meanwhile, outside libraries and long halls, a grandmother teaches a child how to keep an onion through winter without letting it sprout too early. That, too, is commentary. That, too, is a right. The underworld continues to invent small proofs that compassion is compatible with rules. A corridor is regraded so the newly arrived do not stumble at the threshold where night is thicker. A gate is hung so it does not groan like threat, but sigh like furniture. The ferryman, after centuries of the same angle of arm, has a bench made for his back. Someone tucks a folded piece of linen beneath one leg so it will not rock. He pretends not to notice. He notices. Persephone keeps a ledger that is not about coin. In it, she tracks improvements that cannot be measured, a room that feels less like before and more like welcome, a petition answered in fewer days with more words, a place set aside where grief may speak loudly without being mistaken for disobedience. There are no fines for weeping. There are no fines for silence. There is a cost for cruelty, and it is called no. Mercy is not the absence of judgment. It is judgment shaped like a hand instead of a knife. Hades attends to boundaries with the attention of a fine joiner. He checks the fit of gate and jamb, listens to hinges, tests the fairness of lines by eye and by something older than eye. When he corrects, he does not scold. He points. You have seen carpenters speak with wood and parents speak with children in exactly this way. Power that doesn't brag becomes comfortable to sit near. Seasons keep their chores, and you learn yours. Witness. You return again and again to the moment of the bite, not to litigate it, but to remember how the room changed, how the torches steadied, how the rivers quieted, how your own posture eased as if your bones had agreed to their work. You hold that memory up to everything else and measure, not to judge, but to keep time. The prophecy hums, then lowers into a purr. It has what it asked for, a world that can survive its own weather without pretending the weather won't come. You stand in the hall where torches are never blown out by drafts because drafts are taught to respect flame. You look at the queen returning down a corridor that does not need carpets to be kind, because stone has learned to be gentle. You look at the Lord holding his realm and not squeezing it. You look at the seed that was a key, the key that was a ring, the ring that was a door, the door that was a choice. The best locks are the ones both sides can open. You are ready to move. Above, people will keep planting, keep lifting their lamps on nights when the story asks to be told in low voices with hands around mugs. Below, people will keep arriving at a pace that never speeds up in panic or slows in denial. Hermes will keep walking. The ferryman will keep rowing. The calendar will keep doing its simple math and telling you, without apology, when to rest. You climb a stair that isn't a stair. It is a slope so patient it passes for level. At the top, you look back. The hall holds steady. The torchlight makes its golden arguments and wins them, politely. Hades touches 2 fingers to the basalt as if confirming that the mountain still agrees. Persephone pauses at a threshold and lowers her head a fraction while the stone learns her shape again. The rivers continue their literary ambitions and write long, legible sentences to each other, endlessly, on water. You turn toward the gate, toward the place where the air starts remembering grass, toward the promise that every descent is a vow with a return clause. The wheel is turning, not to trap you, but to carry you past and back and past again until you know the route by heart, and the heart stops treating the route as an enemy. The seeds in the darkness gleam one last time in your mind's palm. You close your fingers around them, not to hide, to hold, and step toward a sky that already knows what to do with you when you arrive. You step into the pause between breaths, into the quiet on the turning edge of the year where the air smells of stubble fields and cooled stone, and the light has the color of brass polished by many hands. The wheel has learned its work. You feel it in the ground, the slow, unshowy confidence of a rhythm that no longer needs rehearsal. You lift your fingers and there it is again, the faint tack of pomegranate on your skin, the memory of a sweetness that made a promise. Above you, cranes rewrite the sky with their migrating lines. Below you, Rivers mouth the same careful syllables they have mouthed since the day Persephone ate the seeds. You know what this means. You know what comes next. The world will keep its bargain, and the bargain will keep the world. A breeze slides by, carrying equal parts hayloft and hearth ash. Someone in the distance is knocking grain from a last sheaf. Someone closer latches a door and does not hurry about it. That is the scent of trust, not the perfume of triumph, but the plain warmth of tasks that assume tomorrow will accept them. You rest your weight on both feet and let your shoulders lower. You are about to walk a corridor that belongs to everyone. Plowmen, queens, ferrymen, scholars with chalk on their sleeves, and it will take you from the open field to the counting room of time, where cycles pay their rent in full. A bargain is only real when it changes how you breathe. You begin on a ridge where summer is still finishing its sentence and autumn has already cleared its throat. The grass here is half green and half gold, like a book you are rereading with new eyes. To your left, vineyards lean into their last sweetness. To your right, olive trees ask the sun for one more afternoon. Down in the valley, a road becomes two roads, then one again. One route for carts heavy with grain, another for people who walk because walking edits their thoughts. The light has corners now. It is not the high, careless spill of high summer. It is angled, considerate, gilding rather than drowning. It makes a better listener of everything it touches. You see barns breathe out stored warmth when the doors open. You hear the stiff rustle of drying husks and, between those sounds, a different quiet, the quiet of a field no longer tasked with urgency. Even the rivers have changed key. What was a bright silver talk is now a lower running paragraph. There are shrines along the road, plain stones at the edge of ditches, little roofs that keep the rain off candles that have already melted themselves into agreeable puddles. Some shrines have a sheaf of wheat laid crosswise, some a sprig of mint in a clay cup. You notice how ordinary the offerings look. That is their greatness. No gold leaf, no trumpets. A bargain this large is best honored by work that keeps. The gods do not need your luxury. They need your schedule. If you look hard, you can see a second landscape ghosting the first. In place of fields, lines on a calendar. In place of barns, entries in a ledger. The bargain of the seasons is a contract disguised as weather. It reads, in patient language, you will cultivate, you will gather, you will rest, you will wait, you will begin again. It carries no threat clause, it carries a consequence clause you wrote yourself the first time you planted anything. Beans, hope, a promise you meant to keep. You start at a threshing floor, stone under straw. The air tastes of dust and a sweetness that sits at the back of the tongue, like faith after a good meal. A boy runs past with a flail longer than he is tall, and his laughter knocks a few grain husks into the air. His mother snatches the flail, not unkind, and sets it upright like a standard. A man rolls a millstone with that wary affection people reserve for things that could break a foot. No one says, harvest, aloud. The task says it for them. Then the offerings. Not big things, not things people will miss come winter. A bowl of first flour, still warm from the friction of grinding. A cup of new oil that glows like patience. A braid of garlic tied with a string whose knot you could untie in the dark. They say the names, Demeter for plenty, Persephone for the calendar, Hades for the boundary that keeps hunger from becoming panic. Some of them speak the way people speak to grandparents. Some of them keep their heads down and say nothing. The saying and the not saying make equal sense. Gratitude is not an emotion here. It is a unit of measure. Go on to the market. The stalls look unremarkable because they are perfect. Figs, yes, but a cloth over them so they do not forget their manners. Fish, yes, but shaved ice under the scales so the sea won't take offense. Bread, still singing faintly to itself as it cools. A woman counts by touching, thumb to finger, the way accountants will always count when tablets are not at hand. A man argues prices like a musician does scales, daily, meticulous, without spite. Under the shade of an awning, two people swap folk wisdom about storing pears, and you realize you're listening to theology told in fruit. Above and below this, the gods are doing their version of the same. Zeus keeps the weather brokered, Poseidon keeps the harbors honest, Hades keeps the gates from forgetting their hinges, Persephone keeps the pages of the year from sticking together. The bargain is not merely that she will spend months above and months below. It is that, by doing so, she will teach everyone else which tasks belong to light and which to dimness, and how to bless both without lying about either. At dusk, in a courtyard that smells of wet stone and bread ends, you witness something like a ritual practice itself into existence. A woman lifts a small, chipped cup of barley drink and mint. No fancy vessel. The cup's virtue is its familiarity, and says nothing, then passes it to the next set of hands. They accept it with the kind of care you give small animals and new ideas. It travels the length of the courtyard and returns emptier and heavier. No proclamation is made. A rite has decided to be a rite. The holiest ceremonies are the ones you could keep doing if the priest fell asleep. It happens on an evening the color of hammered copper. A wind comes down from the hills with just enough teeth to remind you that comfort will soon require ingenuity. You walk a road out of town past a granary that knows its numbers and a shrine that knows its geography. At a crossroads, the land offers you three choices, and the gods offer you one. Keep going. Then the sky misbehaves in a deliberate way. Not thunder. There is no drama in it. The light shifts like a hand pressed gently on the shoulder of a hurrying child. Everything pauses. Even the quarry stones remember they were mountains once and hold still to honor the thought. You hear a far bell that no temple owns. It is the bell of the year announcing itself as we and not I. And there, because you are listening for it, you hear two pulses become audible to mortal ears. They do not boom, they cohere. The deep, ground-bred thrum of the underworld holds and is steady. The quick, breathward measure of the upper air returns and is bright. They do not fight. They braid. The bargain is not only signed, it is spoken aloud in a language without vowels. The hair on your arms stands up, then lies down like grass after a gust. Nobody else on the road stops walking. They do not need to. The contract has been notarized in their marrow. Power is loud when it is new. When it is true, it becomes quiet. You sink onto a low wall, warm on one side from the day, cool on the other where night has started its chores, and you think this is as dramatic as it needs to be. No erupting chariots. No shouting from heaven. Just a world that has decided to be trustworthy in public. You breathe once for summer, once for autumn, and somewhere under your ribs the counts accept each other. In a farmhouse kitchen, stockpots move from hooks to hearthstones. The room smells of onion and discipline. Someone wipes a board clean with a piece of bread rather than a cloth. That is economy and affection at once. A child asks why the days are shorter now. The answer includes a goddess, a mother, a river you cannot cross without paying, and a seed that was a promise. The child nods, not because she understands myth, but because she has already learned, from chores, that schedules are love in table form. At the blacksmith's yard, a man hammers a hinge the size of a newborn's forearm. He is making a gate not for a palace but a sheepfold. He looks at the sky as if it is a colleague and times his strikes by the light. He knows winter will test doorways the way arguments test patience. He makes his hinge so it will not rankle when the weather stiffens. He is an excellent theologian in iron. On the docks, nets are mended in a pattern that makes room for mistakes later. A woman ties knots with the gesture of someone who can tie them even if her fingers are numb. The sea is not persuaded by stories. It respects habit. She tosses a crust to a gull and says under her breath the names of people at home so she does not forget who should argue with her when she returns. Faith is a verb, a list of things you do in the right order on days that are not special. You have heard, behind the public story, old whispers that the count of seeds was not only about months but about modes. Months of labor, months of teaching, months of tending the dead, months of tending the living. Some temples kept 4 lanterns through the darker half and 2 during the lighter, to keep women company when nursing and keep men honest when counting. Did Persephone eat 2 seeds or 6? The fragments do not agree. Did she choose the second half deliberately, to bind herself to people who would need a queen when they most feared losing names? The fragments are less a chorus than a flock. They do not line up, they lift and turn together and still get where they were going. Historians still argue whether Eleusis built its rites on a pre-existing calendar, or whether the calendar took its shape from the rites. They cross-reference rainfall records with pottery layers. They footnote each other with the affection of rivals who plan to be buried near each other so the arguments can continue. They draw diagrams of grain cycles that look like music and call them interpretations. Some say the underworld myth was a teaching method to formalize crop rotation. Others say crop rotation was a way to keep a vow to Persephone. They are both correct in the way people are correct when they love a subject more than their own reputation. Meanwhile, in kitchens, women soak beans on time. Meanwhile, in barns, men sharpen scythes at precisely the angle their fathers taught them. Meanwhile, in the underworld, a bench has been moved 6 inches because that is where people actually want to sit and listen to the sound of the river when they arrive. This is what sacred looks like when it refuses to advertise. The argument keeps the myth breathing, the chores keep it fed. You check your pockets and find, of course, what you expected, the heartbeat you have been carrying since the Dictaean cave, the smooth memory of a stone wrapped to look like a child, the prophecy that once shouted and now hums because it trusts you heard it the first time. Everything that mattered at the beginning still matters. It is only better arranged. When you think of Kronos now, you do not feel only dread. You feel grammar, the grammar of a world that tried to keep time by swallowing it. He failed because swallowing is not stewardship. When you think of Hades now, you do not feel only chill. You feel joinery, the fair fit of hinge to post. When you think of Persephone, you do not feel only blossom. You feel ledger, columns reconciled, credits and debits that refuse cruelty and therefore add up. Zeus appears at politely spaced intervals as whether you can plan around. Poseidon arrives when boats need reminding not to believe in their own cleverness. Hermes crosses thresholds, oils the latch so it will not squeal. Demeter does not smile, exactly, she supervises. You realize with relief that godhood here is not showmanship. It is maintenance. The cosmos is not a spectacle. It is a well-run house. A baker in a windowless alley learns to listen for the different quiet of dough in cold months. It rises more slowly and argues less. He answers by speaking to it under his breath, the way you speak to a tired friend whose mind still wants to make one more point. A woman whose husband fishes wraps his hands in wool at night and asks of the sea nothing more than safe footing and a fair price for danger. A child sticks a sprig of rosemary into a notebook and writes, for memory, knowing that scent remembers what paper cannot. All of them are theologians. None of them would accept the title. At the city's edge, a pair of elders show a young couple the trick of keeping a clay jar cool in a pit with wet sand. It is not enough to believe you will be thirsty tomorrow, one says. You must prepare to be thirsty tomorrow. The couple nods. Religion has never received so clear a sermon. In the underworld, a new practice. People arriving are given, after the first questions and the first quiet, a seat beside someone who has been there long enough to be gentle. The long-timers tell the newcomers where the good shadows are, how to sleep when sleep is a confusion, and which corner of the river speaks best for listening. Persephone passes by and touches the wall with her fingers, and the stone leans toward her like a plant toward a window. You do not decide whether this is metaphor or geology. You accept the gift of not having to decide. Civilization is the art of teaching comfort to sit beside mystery without correcting it. It is a year of blight in one valley, and people there begin to mutter in voices that could harden if neglected. The wheat refuses to stand up straight, a fungus writes its little alphabets on leaves. There is a temptation to say the bargain has failed. There is a temptation to look for a throat to blame. Instead, carts from 2 valleys over arrive with sacks at the bottom that do not match their own math. Nobody calls it charity, they call it keeping the wheel. A priest in one town lowers a staged miracle he had been preparing and lifts, instead, a series of obvious instructions about storing barley safe from damp. Demeter does not appear. Demeter does not need to. The bargain appears, in the shape of neighbors who, as it turns out, knew the contract by heart. In a year of flood elsewhere, the sea takes back a field it never wanted, and the field pretends offense. Poseidon does not apologize. He is the sea. But a new embankment goes up that listens better to the old bend of the river instead of insisting on the straightness of rulers. People stop telling the water how to be a map and ask the water to help draw one. When a covenant is healthy, it is more useful than a miracle. Persephone refines small mercies into policy, the way a good teacher makes kindness reproducible. A corridor gets a second source of light, not to banish dark, but to teach the eye where to rest. A waiting room acquires a shelf for letters that will not be delivered, next to a bowl where names can be said aloud by anyone willing to carry them. Hades signs off with a glance, and the glance holds more meaning than a proclamation. He keeps his own craft. No soul leaves without consent, no living enters without cost. But he now permits, under watch, certain crossings of voice, readings of names from above to below on agreed nights, sound moving like a fairy. The ferryman objects by tradition, then rose with better posture than usual. Hermes rolls his eyes affectionately and writes a note on a tablet that will be lost and found exactly when it needs to be. Boundaries that breathe last longer than walls that shout. Eleusis blooms in the dark like a seed that likes conversation. Torches, yes. Barley mint that tastes like home. A path that turns 3 times not because of geometry but because a heart benefits from 3 opportunities to choose the same thing. Initiates do not come out radiating secrets, they come out making better bread and standing in line with improved patience. Critics are disappointed by the lack of fireworks. Practitioners shrug and go about their work with softer shoulders. There is a hall with a floor designed to carry a crowd's weight without complaint. The architect whispers a prayer to Persephone every time he checks a beam, and the prayer sounds like arithmetic. A potter burns his hand and does not curse, not because he is pious, but because cursing wastes breath needed for blowing on the wound. The gods accept both responses as sincere. The mysteries are not unknown. They are known on purpose by those who will use them. You move again to the edge where above and below shake hands. It is evening. A kitchen empties itself into sleep, pans inverted, a loaf half covered so it can think about morning. In the field, stubble glows as if remembering fire. From the harbor, someone calls a name and is answered. From the hill, someone answers a name and is called. The bargain is not visible, but it has furniture everywhere. Below, torches lean into their long vowels. The rivers do that satisfied murmur reserved for plans that did not need improving. Persephone walks a corridor and pauses to move a stone the distance of a fingernail. Hades places a hand momentarily on the basalt, the way a craftsman pats a doorjamb before leaving a room he made. Hermes is already halfway to somewhere else, smiling as only a person who loves thresholds can smile. Demeter in the dark field is telling a sleeping seed it is not sleeping, it is gathering. The future is not later. It is the next good turn of a familiar wheel. Stand on the ridge. Breathe. The calendar is not a cage. It is a handrail. It will steady you when light slants and rooms change temperature and nothing outside you shouts instructions. Step forward. The road bends into a shape you recognize, because you have walked it in seasons of honey and seasons of broth, in fields that brag and fields that sulk. Continue. The bargain will hold. It is inscribed where weather cannot smudge it, in the way people show up to stack wood in fours and to mark names with a straight back and to open doors on the good hinge. Ahead lies a table with places for the living and an accounting for the dead, and a question the year keeps politely on the corner of its mouth. If balance is a gift, how will you carry it when it grows heavy? You don't need an answer yet. You need only the next task done properly, and the next breath taken without hoarding. The torchlight behind you keeps its modest arguments. The fields ahead of you keep their honest promises. A seed sleeps and is, more accurately, at work. You move toward a valley where the seasons have already signed their names. The ink is dry. The page is turning. The air of Olympus feels heavier tonight. You walk through the marbled corridors where echoes of ancient victories seem to cling to the columns themselves. Torches flicker in their sconces, their flames bending as though bowing to the unseen weight of the moment. From somewhere deep in the palace, a low hum rises, a vibration you feel in your bones before you truly hear it. The call has gone out. All who claim a seat in the divine order have been summoned. Not just the 12 Olympians, but the elder deities, the primordial remnants, the keepers of law and chaos. It is the council of immortals, an assembly convened only when the very order of existence trembles. You follow the current of silent figures toward the great hall. The air smells faintly of cedar and storm clouds, an omen that Zeus's temper is near the surface. The marble floor beneath your feet gleams, polished to a mirror's sheen, reflecting not only the gods but the towering frescoes above, scenes of creation, war, and uneasy peace. At the center stands the council table, a massive ring of black stone carved from the heart of Mount Othrys, the former seat of the Titans. Its surface is inlaid with veins of gold that pulse faintly, as though alive. Around it, the high-backed chairs, each unique to its occupant, await the gods who will soon fill them. Zeus arrives first, as is his right, the storm in his eyes tempered only by the cold precision in his movements. His robes are white and edged with gold, but it's the lightning-crowned scepter in his hand that draws every gaze. He sits, but not before letting the silence stretch, a performance of dominance in itself. Poseidon enters next, trident in hand, salt water still dripping from his bronze pauldrons. He does not bow, but the faintest smile, half challenge, half amusement, passes between him and his brother. Athena follows, her bronze helm tucked under one arm, the spear in her other hand gleaming with a light that seems untouched by the shadows of the hall. Then come the others, Hera, eyes sharp as obsidian, Demeter, carrying the scent of wheat and autumn rain, Apollo and Artemis, twin gazes scanning the room for unspoken tensions, Hades, moving like a shadow detached from the walls, his presence drawing a subtle chill that makes the torches shiver. By the time the last chair is filled, the great hall feels like a sealed amphora, pressure building, waiting for the first crack. Zeus's voice finally breaks the silence. "We convene under threat," he says, each word rolling like distant thunder. "The balance has shifted. I have seen it in the omens. Lightning that strikes without clouds, tides that rise without the moon's pull, and whispers in the night that speak of an old order returning." Zeus's words land like nails set into seasoned wood, no bounce, no splinter, just a clean bite into the grain. You feel the room lean toward him, not in devotion but in habit. Habit is its own weather on Olympus. Poseidon clicks the butt of his trident against the ring of black stone, once, twice. The sound travels the table and returns to him with a briny aftertaste. Threats that arrive without warning are usually man-made, he says, voice smooth as tide over pebbles. Or God-made. His glance slides across the circle and pauses a fraction too long on Athena. Hera speaks without turning her head. If we came to assign blame, we would need a larger room. Athena does not react to Poseidon's look. She lets it pass as a cloud passes a mountain. She sets her helm on the stone beside her and rests the spear on her knee. We came because the pattern is off, she says. The wheel is turning, but too quickly in some places and too slowly in others. Fields in the north see spring twice. In the west, winter refuses to lock its door. Her voice is calm, but you hear a metronome inside it. You remember the heartbeat you've carried since the cave. It finds a companion in her cadence. Power argues loudly. Wisdom edits the argument's rhythm. Hades lays 2 fingers on the black stone table, and the torches nearest him steady. The gates hold, he says, more to the air than to the company. The dead come when they should. They do not stroll. A soft exhale passes around the ring, relief no one wanted to admit they needed. The world is braver when boundaries behave. Demeter leans forward, wheat scent folding into the lamp smell. Mortals adjust because they must. But the agreement, you hear the capital letter without seeing it, is not ornamental. If Persephone's path is tugged even an inch off course by whether we did not vote for, you will taste my displeasure in your bread. She says it like a harvest tally. A ripple of wry amusement passes over Apollo's mouth. Artemis watches the ceiling for shafts in the stone where a lie might try to hide. Hermes, already half tilted toward the nearest exit, is alert the way a door is alert, ready to be between rooms on a moment's notice. Zeus drums his fingers once on the scepter. Lightning gathers politely around his knuckles, then retreats. The threats are not all domestic, he says. Old names stir. In caves that have not hosted a prayer in 1,000 winters, fire answers itself. On the islands, oracles cough smoke they cannot interpret. Historians still argue, Athena adds, and there's the lightest ghost of a smile at the corner of her mouth, whether councils like this echo mortal assemblies, Areopagus, Boole, Senate, or whether mortals built their assemblies from memories of us. The argument is charming. We're here either way. She turns her face openly to Poseidon now. So we plan. Poseidon's smile widens into something shark-bright. Plan. Or decree. Plan, Hestia says from her quiet seat. You hadn't noticed her arrive, but the room has been warmer since she did. We decree when the house is in flames. We plan when the windows rattle. The line between emergency and maintenance is drawn in the heat of Hestia's palm. Zeus gestures with the scepter. A storm answers outside as if to illustrate a point, then puts itself away. Reports. He flicks his gaze to Hermes, who produces a roll of tablets and a short stylus already thinking in notes. Hermes, islands, Delos and Naxos, experienced high tide at noon with no lunar justification. On the isthmus, sailors swear the sea breathed in and forgot to breathe out for half a bell. At Delphi, the Omphalos sweated, I quote, a clean salt. No ill omen recorded, only confusion. He flips a tablet with the speed of a bird adjusting wings. In Eleusis, the torches flared blue at the third turning, then returned to orange when the barley drink was poured. Demeter nods once. They kept pouring. Hermes's grin is the grin of a successful messenger. It contains relief. Oh yes. Zeus turns to Poseidon. See, brother. Poseidon tips the trident slightly as if tipping a hat to a difficult horizon. Currents have new opinions. They do not disobey, but they negotiate. I can keep ports honest. He glances sideways at Athena again. Provided city walls do not begin to confuse defense with arrogance. Athena, you mean, provided cities keep gates that open as well as close. Words. Poseidon murmurs. You are never short of them. Bridges, she returns. I am never short of those either. There's a rustle around the table, the good-natured discomfort of kin who have watched this duet before. You remember another well-known quarrel between them. Who would patron Athens? The contest of Trident Spring versus Olive Tree. The city chose the tree. The sea has not forgotten. Neither has the tree. Both keep their posts. Hades tilts his head, speaking into the cool of the floor as much as to the ring. Whatever shakes above has not cracked below. There is a tremor at changeover, the moment she passes, but that is part of the bargain's physics. It is not illness. It is a healthy cough. The table's gold veining glows faintly as he says it, as if Othrys itself remembers what a cough can become when ignored. Hera's voice slices neatly through 3 overlapping comments. Then the matter is drift, not disaster. She looks at Zeus with married accuracy. You want to send a message that reads we are attentive rather than we are afraid. Yes, Zeus says, grateful not to have to translate himself. We act. We do not panic. The difference between a warning and a threat is whether the roof already leaks. Athena unfolds a small map. No continent lines, no measured seas, only a lattice of thin gold threads stretched across blank vellum. Where the threads cross, tiny weights of polished hematite hold them true. Here, she says, touching 3 intersections. Delphi, Eleusis, the isthmus. We suspend a listening net. Not to catch, to count. Messenger relays every new anomaly to 3 points at once. Triangulation, she adds, tasting the mortal word like a new figure. We measure drift so we can discern pattern. Apollo leans in, sunlight gathering in his eyes. I can place lyre stations along those lines. Sound carries news faster than feet if tuned correctly. A pattern out of tune reveals itself quickest in music. Artemis, and I will keep the high paths watched. If night animals begin to act like day, we will know before shepherds do. Zeus nods. Good. Poseidon. Poseidon twirls the trident, a lazy flourish that would be arrogance if it weren't so honest a pleasure. I'll post sea marks that report. Poles that hum when currents change mind. I'll teach 3 harbor masters the hum so they don't confuse my markers with a drunk fisherman's story. Demeter. And I will ask farmers to write the dates of green and gold with a straight hand and no poetry. She cuts a look toward Apollo that is almost a smile. Song later. Numbers first. When gods agree to count, the world gets a pencil. Hades, I will authorize crossings of sound, names read across the gates on agreed nights, to test the seals. If even a whisper comes back wrong, we will feel it. He glances to Hermes. The messenger inclines his head, already choreographing thresholds. Hera folds her hands. And I will ensure the council behaves like a council, not a theater. Reports must be boring to be useful. You hear, just under the table, where meaning keeps its shoes, the old oath rise like steam. The sticks will hear what they promise. Break an oath on that river, and for 9 years immortality tastes like chalk. The well-known penalty breathes a chill through the hall and evaporates, leaving resolve behind. Zeus lifts his scepter, then lowers it with deliberate restraint. Then we are agreed on watchfulness. He pauses. We are not agreed on cause. Athena, not yet. Poseidon, but you have a suspicion. Zeus lets silence splay its fingers. Beyond the windows, lightning works at a respectful distance, lighting the clouds' ribs. The old world resents being only buried. Sometimes it wishes to be remembered as living. He sets the scepter's tip to the Othries stone, and for a heartbeat you taste iron. I will not have titans at my table, but I will not be surprised if their dust wishes itself breath. Hades's eyes, dark as a tunnel's honest truth, make no change that a mortal would see. Dust, he says quietly, works for me. It isn't a threat. It's jurisdiction. The past does not need to wake up to steal your sleep. It only needs you to rehearse it badly. Hera, then we do two things at once. Keep the calendar, watch the edges. She looks at Athena. Edges. Athena taps 3 more intersections on her thread map. Distant capes, a mountain saddle, a cave mouth too symmetrical to be innocent. Places where thresholds like to loiter. We place pairs, never alone, at each. One watcher learned in storms, one learned in patience. Divide et custodias, she mutters, inventing a policy in a language that hasn't yet decided to exist. Ares, who has been spinning a dagger against his palm more out of muscle memory than menace, finally speaks. If something wants a fight, why all this counting? We could meet it in the throat. Hestia answers before Athena can, voice like bread broken in a clean tear. Because winning a fight does not repair a house. And we live in a house. A murmur of assent that sounds like chairs adjusted politely goes round the ring. Hermes clears his throat with professional optimism. I volunteer for the thresholds, carrying messages, planting listening posts, teaching harbor masters to hum. But I'll need a cloak that lies better than cloth. Athena reaches beneath the table and produces a folded thing that is not exactly fabric. It's a pattern. She shakes it once and it remembers how to be a garment. When you step between, this will step with you, she says. It will make you look like what the moment already expects. Hermes grins. My favorite kind of honesty. Disguise is not always deception. Sometimes it is context. Zeus turns the circle into smaller circles, teams, pairs, errands that sound like fables when you stack them. A goddess with a thread map and a god of songs laying lyres along fault lines. A sea lord teaching harbor masters how to hear their own tides. A queen of harvest asking scribes to love numbers enough to write them straight. You watch duty distribute itself like lanterns along a long road. It is the most comforting sight on Olympus. Then the air cools. Not much, just enough that torchlight looks momentarily taller. The doors at the far end of the hall open of their own accord with the sound of stone admitting stone. You think for a breath that it is theater. It is not. Persephone enters. Not in a burst, not in a hush. She enters like a season does when it is right for it to be there. A faint red, no more than the memory of pomegranate, rests at the corner of her mouth like punctuation. Shadows behave around her the way children do when a competent aunt arrives. They tidy themselves. Continue, she says gently, when several chairs half rise out of respect. Her voice holds field and corridor in equal measure. I'm only here to listen. Demeter's shoulders loosen a fraction you can see from across the table. Hades looks neither surprised nor possessive. He looks like a hinge that has just been oiled. Zeus inclines his head. Lady of the turning, we are discussing drift. Persephone moves to a chair that is empty not because it lacks an owner, but because it is hers when she chooses it. She does not sit yet. She lays the flat of her palm on the Othries ring and closes her eyes for a breath. When she opens them, the bargain holds. The path is clear. but there is a pull at certain crossroads. It feels like a hand that does not know whether it is asking for help or asking for trouble. Locations. Athena asks. Persephone touches the thread map without looking at it. Her finger rests where 3 gold threads cross over blank vellum in a quiet coastal valley you do not recognize. Here, she says. And here. 2 more touches, a mountain saddle with a shrine where no official road goes, a market town whose fountain remembers older gods than the ones paid today. They are not loud places. That's why they are dangerous. Danger prefers rooms where nobody thinks to whisper. Poseidon tilts his trident in grudging admiration. She can feel current through stone. At both ends, Hades says simply. Athena's mind is already rearranging the room. We'll send paired watchers, she repeats, but not soldiers. People who read rooms and doors. Hermes at the crossings. Artemis on the ridges. Ares on standby. She offers him a kindness wrapped in a leash. He accepts the leash because he likes the ribbon. Zeus raises the scepter just enough to gather the storm's attention, and not enough to invite it to dinner. We will meet again when the net sings. He looks around the ring, holding each gaze just long enough to remind it that looking away is a choice. Speak your oaths. One by one, in voices that do not perform, they speak. Not long promises, specific ones. Poseidon, I will teach the harbors to hear. Athena, I will count the crossings, not the applause. Demeter, I will annotate spring with dates, not hymns. Hades, I will keep the gates, but let sound learn to travel. Persephone, I will turn on time. Zeus, I will not confuse lightning with judgment. Hera, I will keep the room honest. Hestia, I will keep water hot. Hermes, I will arrive. The Styx hears and pretends not to. That is her courtesy. The storm outside eases its jaw. Torchlight shortens to its normal manners. The council table looks less like a drum and more like furniture. The council stands not all at once, but with the slow grace of a house rising when a respected guest receives her cloak. You think it is done. It is not quite. As the gods begin to thread toward doors that understand them, Athena remains seated, eyes lowered to the map that is more intention than geography. Poseidon lingers at her shoulder like a cliffside current. Daughter of strategy, he says, tone light. You put lyres where I put buoys. She smiles without showing teeth. Music teaches discipline faster than ropes. He taps a thread with the trident's prong and does not quite touch it. Your line crosses my tide. Good, she says. Then we'll hear it twice. Rivalry is a kind of twinship that refuses to share a mirror. Hera brushes your sleeve, none of the others see. You barely feel it. Do not mistake this for peace, she says softly. It is choreography. Then she is gone, leaving the advice like a pin in a map only you can see. Hestia passes last. She sets a small, almost ugly clay cup on the table, the sort mortals use when guests exceed expectations. For whoever stays late, she says. When she leaves, the room's temperature remembers its obligations. You follow the slow spill of immortals out into the portico where the storm is practicing how to be missed. Olympus is a series of balconies wrapped around a mountain that flatters the sky. Tonight the sky acts flattered. Below, the mortal world glows in its hearth constellations. Farms, towns, ships like fallen stars, the black script of rivers writing themselves towards sleep. Hermes is already rehearsing 3 errands at once with his hands. Apollo hums a test chord under his breath and winces when a lightning flicker throws the acoustics off. He adjusts the note. Artemis is a smudge at the edge of a roofline, already a rumor of herself. Demeter is speaking in a language bread understands. Poseidon tastes the air with the accuracy of a wolf. Hades and Persephone stand close without touching. Athena watches the horizon like a captain marking reefs only she can see. Zeus steps to the parapet. His profile is cut by a calm the poets rarely give him credit for. He doesn't raise the scepter. He doesn't need to. The storm reads the room and unknots. You breathe, and the air answers with the sound roofs make when they forgive storms for being storms. The council of immortals has adjourned, but the work, which is the point of councils, has only begun. Down in the coastal valley Persephone marked with a fingertip, a fisherman will wake just before dawn and pause on his doorstep because the sea sounds like it's thinking. On the mountain saddle, a shepherd will notice a shrine stone that has shifted a hair to the left and nudge it back, not because anyone told him to, but because thresholds feel better when square. In the market town with the old fountain, a child will drop a coin and listen too long to the way it strikes water, and later, years later, will invent a way to count with sound. Decisions made in thunder are kept, or lost, in chores. You step back into the great hall once more, when it is almost empty. The black ring of authries gleams with the faint residue of hands and vows. For a moment you think you see, in the gold veining, the shadow of an older council, stone remembering titans sitting where their undoers now sit. It is not a threat, only geology practicing nostalgia. You lay your palm on the ring. It is warm. It is warm because Hestia's cup still holds heat, because oaths travel as slowly as good soup, because a house that plans is warmer than a house that boasts. A breeze, no more than a sigh with a destination, moves the torches just enough to make their shadows stretch and return. You head for the threshold, and a door opens in the polite way of doors that have learned to read footsteps. Outside, dawn tarnish starts to silver the eastern lip of the world. You go to meet it, carrying the map of threads in your head though Athena rolled it away, carrying the hum of names Hades allowed to travel, carrying the schedule Demeter whispered over fields, carrying the salt of Poseidon's markers in your mouth, carrying the plain cup of Hestia's, carrying Zeus's restraint as if it were a new tool, carrying Hera's warning like a safety pin. Mostly, you carry the habit of counting, heartbeats, tides, lanterns lit along the path, because counting is how you keep your place in a moving story. The first lyre station will be tuned by midday. The first buoy will hum by nightfall. Hermes will be 3 places at once and precisely on time at all of them. And somewhere, quietly, dangerously, something old will test a door that has never been locked and learn, to its surprise, that unlocked does not mean unguarded. Now, keep your steps soft. The gods have adjourned. The world has begun. The council continues in the way all good councils continue. In corridors, on thresholds, at tables where someone has left an ugly cup for the last person still doing the math. You step into a hush that isn't empty so much as attentive, the kind of quiet a field keeps before frost sketches its first thin lines across puddles. The storm over Olympus has folded itself into mist, and somewhere below, in the soft machinery of the world, a new sound is trying on a body. Your breath makes a small cloud in the air, and for a beat you mistake it for smoke from a hidden kiln. It isn't. It's just you, reminded that warmth is alone the night accepts and returns with interest. Far off, a lyre station hums a single clean note. Closer, a buoy in a dark harbor answers with a tone that tastes of iron. Between those 2 chimes, something moves underfoot, quiet as a thought you haven't admitted, steady as a promise you didn't mean to make and now cannot unmake. Not every earthquake breaks a wall. Some split a sentence. You begin where Persephone's fingertip touched Athena's thread map, a coastal valley that keeps its voice low. The sea lies there like a patient listener. The town is unambitious in the way that keeps books balanced and shutters painted. Nets hang from pegs with the dignity of elders' erring knees. Clay jars breathe cool under damp cloths. dogs dream with the frankness of those who have earned it. Hermes arrives at dawn without arriving. A door opens in the right direction at the right time, and he simply happens to be where the threshold expected a body. He leans against a salt-stained post and hears what the harbor is thinking. Today the water is writing in longer sentences. Not choppy, not storm-bent, just longer. The harbormaster, old, kind, incapable of a short story, pads down the planks and clears his throat. "Your markers hum," he says, half proud, half worried. "Good," Hermes answers, and then, because good can be so close to ominous you can fit them in the same pocket, he adds, "and we'll keep listening." They walk the quay with the slow authority of men who could walk faster if that served anything. A gull lands on a piling as if taking notes. The buoy hums again, 2 tones this time, like a lyre remembering a chord. Hermes hears not just sound but shape, the curve of a current thinking about changing its mind. Most danger arrives as a suggestion that sounds reasonable. He teaches the harbormaster the interval to hum back when the buoy speaks strangely, a simple call and answer that rings truer than elaborate warnings. If the sea means mischief, Hermes says lightly, it should be made to admit it out loud. The old man nods, unfooled by tone. You watch the lesson pass between them like a small, solid tool. It isn't brilliance. It's maintenance, which is harder. Up in the mountain saddle where a shrine's flat stone moved a hair to the left, Artemis arrives as a certainty the slope has always had. The shepherd doesn't startle. He lifts 2 fingers in the greeting reserved for people you would trust with your flock if the sky went wrong. She returns it with the economy of a nod that wastes no muscle. "Rams have been up earlier than rams should be," he says, "and last night a fox crossed the path without checking either way. Night thinks it is day." Artemis kneels by the shrine stone and smells weather there. Not clouds, but decisions the clouds are about to make. The stone itself has a bruise, a darker spot in its pale grain where pressure collected and didn't move on. She presses the heel of her hand to it and feels, impossibly, a faint thrum. It is not the underworld's slow drum, not the sea's restless syllables. It is more focused, more interior. A whisper practicing to be a word. The first sign of speech is not sound, it's rhythm. She resquares the stone with a shepherd. 3 small shoves and 1 careful lift, and the slab settles like a shoulder under a known hand. "If animals keep confusing the clock," she says, "send word down the line." He points toward the thread of the road and smiles the specific smile of men who know exactly which boy runs fastest and why. At dusk, a wind testing its knives comes through the pass and decides it has appointments elsewhere. The shrine keeps its place. The bruise lightens by a shade. In a market town older than its taxes, a fountain Murmurs names it learned in a century when people still poured libations into any hole that would take them. Athena stands at its lip, as if checking the quality of a mirror that has the good manners to distort slightly. Her helm rests beside her. Her spear tips a fraction toward a drain where coins have adopted the posture of sleeping beetles. Behind her, a scribe whispers dates to Demeter's envoy, who has made a ledger beautiful by refusing to decorate it. Blossom, 2nd week earlier than last. Harvest, on time in name, late in attitude. The envoy grunts. Gratitude is a straight line in her book. The fountain's cadence changes, drip to dribble to a deliberate, double beat. Athena feels it through the soles of her sandals. The tiniest irregularity, a syncopation against the square beat of town life. Not enough to frighten, enough to attract strategy. A pattern does not announce itself, it courts you. She eases the spear tip into a crack between flagstones and levers a hair of ground upward. A small pocket the size of a sparrow's rib opens, exhales cool air, and closes before anyone notices but you. In that breath is a smell you've come to recognize. stone that has learned a secret and is tired of keeping it. Athena does not smile. She rolls her shoulders, quiet readiness disguised discomfort, and says to the envoy, "Keep the numbers. Add, this time, the number of times the fountain forgets itself." Accounts with interruptions, the envoy says, "Dry. My favorite kind." She writes a small mark that is not a number exactly, but a promise to recognize one. By midnight, the lyre station's Apollo has placed hum in an order that makes the hairs on your arms practice voting. The first station on a ridge above the isthmus plays a clean, long A, then a high answering E from a tower outside the coastal valley, then a second A from the market town's roof. The buoy hum joins, a low drone like a throat clearing. Sound triangulates what sight cannot, something beneath, moving with purpose, not mass. Apollo tunes without touching, a glance, a new wind, a minor adjustment to the angle of a shelf that turns the station 1 degree toward listening and 1 degree away from boasting. "It's not a storm," he says. "It borrows the habit of storms." Hera's note arrives through Hermes, written on a tablet like household instruction. Behave as if guests are expected. Sweep the floor. Count cups. Do not rearrange furniture until you know how many coats the pegs must carry. It reads like the goddess of marriage sent a memo to a house that thought it was a temple. It is perfect. Preparation is not fear, it is hospitality for outcomes. Down below, Hades authorizes the first crossing of sound since the council. Names read across the gates, line by line, at a measured pace like oars that refuse to splash. The echo returns without distortion. The seals hold. But under the echo, only a whisper, only a tickle. There is another noise now. Not a breach, a tapping. The kind a thought makes when it asks to be let out of a head. Zeus dreams, which is not the same as sleeping. In the dream, the cloud cover over the world lifts like lids, and he looks into a skull large as a city. Not a titan's skull. Not a monster's. His own. Inside, the air is clear, and the light is neither torchlight nor lightning. It is the light of thought when it admits itself into language. He hears something. Not the drum of war, not the long horn of law. A cadence, quick, certain, impatient in the way a river is impatient when the sea is a day's run away. It is building without moving, learning the room without walking in it. He does not fear it. He recognizes it from somewhere older than fear. Power learns to worry. Confidence learns to listen. He wakes before dawn with a headache the shape of a new city's streets. Hera sets a plain cup of water near his hand and does not ask if he needs it. Demeter's envoy's ledger waits on the table with dates like beads on a string. Poseidon's markers hum in a pattern that suggests debate, not mutiny. Zeus rests 2 fingers to his temple and feels the thought tap back. It is not asking permission. It is informing him of its ETA. Historians still argue whether Zeus swallowed Métis as an act of prudence, cruelty, or metaphor. Prudence, because prophecy said a child of Métis would overthrow him. Cruelty, because swallowing is a violent form of possession. Metaphor, because Metis is cunning mind itself. Older fragments say Métis remade herself small and hid in his body the way a river hides under stone in drought. Newer poems insist Athena has no mother at all, sprung swayed generous from a mind that needed no midwife. The argument is a room with 2 doors that open into the same hall. Zeus does not consult scrolls. He stands in a colonnade and listens to the wind bounce off the marble in syllables. The word inside him knocks again. He answers by not flinching. In a cave without prayers, a small fire learns to live on its own smoke. In a fault that thinks it is asleep, a trickle of water says the name of something long out of fashion. On a cliff where men once fastened ropes to lower gifts into the sea for hands they could not see, a rope frays in a way that announces a lesson instead of a disaster. These are not titans waking. They are cupboards opening in a house that has been cleaned too well. Athena meets Poseidon where rock meets spray and says, "It isn't rebellion." He says, "It had better not be." "It's memory," she answers, patient not as a teacher but as a carpenter. The world wants to be sure we remember how it was built. Poseidon snorts. The world could send notes that don't disturb my buoys. "It did," she says, and nods toward the thread map folded under her arm like a shawl. "We pinned them. Before a structure fails, it asks for a story about how it stands." In a kitchen with a view of nothing but a wall, a scholar with flower on her sleeve writes in the margin of a papyrus, "Athena's birth. Was it a surgical strike of meaning, a midwifed idea, a proof that intellect can be embodied without first being a body?" She copies lines from Hesiod and lines from a poem nobody has heard yet because she hasn't written it. Then she stands and knocks the dough back, and the dough answers with a sigh that is every argument ending in bread. She will, later, argue in a forum that Métis inside Zeus is not theft but apprenticeship, knowledge swallowed in order to be digested into wisdom and born again with armor fitted to it. Others will disagree, fiercely, with citations and gestures. The underworld will not care. The underworld will care that a bench near the gate has been moved the length of a fingertip to where grief actually wants to sit. Both matter. Both are true. Philosophy that can't bake is performance. Bread that can't think is waste. The net sings again at noon. Liars answer buoys. Buoys answer liars. Shrines hold their square. Fountains count with better posture. Hera's memo number 2. Do not reassign chores because you are frightened. Frightened chores break plates. Hestia's addendum. Put the heavy mug where the big hands can reach it. The house of gods behaves like a house. Then the tap in Zeus's skull becomes a knock. It is not pain the way mortals frame pain. It is insistence. The way a baby's fist insists. The way a new city insists on its first wall. He straightens and the air straightens with him. Hermes appears because doors love him. He looks at Hera, looks at Zeus, looks at the horizon, and says, "Shall I fetch?" "Not a saw," Hera says dryly. "Not a midwife," Zeus says, and the corner of his mouth admits humor into the situation like a guest too interesting to ignore. Athena, already halfway up the steps, arrives without armor, as if to make room. She stands to Zeus's left and listens with him, her head tipped as though parsing an argument only one voice is speaking. Hades, from a shadow that is more invitation than absence, says, "If it wants a door, give it a door." When a wall asks to be a door, the wisest tool is not a hammer. Hephaestus hears their silence from 3 courtyards away. He arrives carrying the kindest instrument a forge ever made, a wedge shaped like a consequence and a hammer with the patience of mountains. He bows not because hierarchy requires it, but because accuracy does. "Where?" he asks, and Zeus, without shame, touches the place. The room prepares like a hearth prepared for bread. Hera steadies the vessel with a hand no poem gives her credit for. Hestia warms the air exactly 2 degrees. Hermes moves the spectators into the right-wrong place, close enough to witness, far enough to leave the light alone. Demeter steps back because birth makes her pragmatic, and she can bring a garden to a child later. Right now she can best serve by not crowding a door that hasn't learned its hinge. Hephaestus lifts the hammer. The wedge kisses the crown. The sound that follows is not the crack of skull and not the clang of iron. It is a syllable turning inside out. It is thought putting on its sandals. The blow lands as a gift. The roof does not shake. The pillars do not complain. Outside, a cloud that had rehearsed thunder for an hour decides to clap politely instead. In the coastal valley, The buoy goes silent, and then hums a perfect unison with the nearest lyre station, as if relief were a pitch. In the mountain saddle, the shrine stone, good, squared, obedient, decides it can relax an eyebrow. The right sound at the right time persuades the world to reintroduce itself. What steps out, no, what arrives, is not a girl, not a warrior, not a statue. She is seeing, embodied. She is mind with joints. Bronze and calm, luminous without vanity, she looks first at Zeus, not for approval, but for acknowledgement of the shared project. He nods, pride, yes, and relief, yes, but mostly the relief of a craftsman whose plan did not waste material. That is the well-known event, of course. But forgive the soft cliff. Tonight your assignment is not to look directly at the burst, but to hear the rumor of it moving through the floors. We're standing one room away. The next section will open its door. For now, remain in the threshold where a whisper beneath the earth becomes a sentence above it. The lyre net retunes itself at once. Apollo smiles with a musician's private joy. The new frequency makes melody easier. Artemis lifts her chin, not in surprise, in confirmation. Poseidon tastes the air and huffs. Fine, he tells nobody. Let the buoys learn philosophy. Hermes rests his hand on the doorjamb and feels it purr. Hades inclines his head the width of a single coin. Persephone, though above ground today, farmers will swear their lettuces sat up straighter, turns where she is and says to a bee, "Listen." Athena, born 2 rooms away, arriving 2 rooms hence, already exists in the city-states that don't yet know her name. Olive trees feel suddenly more deliberate. Weavers' hands fall into a rhythm that will later be called technique rather than luck. A mason mislays a stone by half a finger, and then, with no injury to his pride, sets it right. Wisdom changes the world not by adding noise but by removing error. Scholars will pour back into the room we left a few pages ago. They will ask whether a mind can be mother and father to a mind, whether swallowing Métis was colonization or collaboration, whether Athena is the exception that proves a rule or the new rule that retires exceptions. Citations will bloom like mold on bread if left uncovered. You are allowed to love these arguments and still put the loaf away properly. Athena herself is not interested in footnotes just now. She is interested in chairs that don't wobble and laws that don't wobble and polities that learn to disagree without eating their calendars. She will take meetings with craftsmen at odd hours and call it worship. She will walk city walls and correct, with 2 words and a finger, a parapet that would have let arrows in at knee height. She will give her first speech not in a temple but in a workshop. Let us build so storms prefer to go around. You stand again at the edge of that first ridge from section 9, the place where summer and autumn shook hands. The air smells of cooled bronze now, and new olive oil, and a hint of laurel rubbed between forefinger and thumb. Somewhere behind a door, a newborn thunderclap is learning not to frighten dishes. The world holds itself very straight, the way a house does while someone carries a sleeping child down the stairs. The whisper beneath the earth has finished its apprenticeship. Above, a footstep you haven't yet heard will rearrange how cities decide to behave. Do not run ahead. Let the threshold do its work. The next room is ready to open. The floor remembers what happened upstairs, and the air has learned a new word. You can taste it before you hear it. Iron shaved so thin it becomes a flavor, smoke braided with laurel, the faint sweetness of oil warming in a lamp that refuses to flicker. Somewhere behind you, a lyre holds one last vibrating string. Somewhere ahead, a buoy inhales and chooses silence. Between them, the world has paused on a threshold. You know this feeling. It is the exact stillness between a promise and the moment it proves itself true, or doesn't. A world is not broken by thunder. It's broken by a sentence that fails to finish. You begin where oaths go to be believed. the quiet hall with the black stone ring cut from Othrys, gold-veined, warmed earlier by hands and vows. The cup Hestia left is cool now. A faint ring of steam salts the table with the memory of heat. In the grain of the stone you see the hours since the council. Hermes's quick shadow crossing like a bird, Demeter's ledger leaving a rectangle of seriousness, Athena's thread map coiled like an obedient snake. Styx hears all this without moving. She is not present as water, not here, she is present as consequences. When the council spoke earlier, you felt the soft tap at your ribs, a river's approval. Now there is another tap, fainter, ambiguous. Not disapproval. Attention. Hera returns first, as if to tidy a room no one else would dare straighten. She moves a chair an inch toward the circle. The chair accepts the correction. Zeus arrives next, profile carved from calm, headache newly domesticated into purpose. He touches the Othrys stone once, grazing it with 2 fingers like a blacksmith checking a temper. Hestia comes because the word after is her jurisdiction. The others are in motion in their appointed places, but the house remains a house only if someone stays in it. Maintenance is how a promise breathes when nobody's watching. Hermes's sandals skitter on the floor like cheerful punctuation. He is an efficient inventory, lyre stations tuned, buoys humming in their agreed manners. Artemis reports the shrine stone square. Apollo says sunrises are arriving when they should, and sunsets when they are expected. One anomaly, small. A message arrived late to the mountain saddle, then arrived again on time, bearing the same words. Duplicated. Athena asks, appearing at the sentence's soft hinge as if the sentence invited her. Echoed, Hermes says, but not by rock. Echoed by intent. Hades arrives in a temperature change. Torches shorten as if sitting straighter at a table. His nod to Hera admits housekeeping. His nod to Zeus acknowledges jurisdiction. To you, he offers what looks like absence and feels like room. Demeter enters last of this small quorum, bringing with her the smell of rain that hasn't decided yet which field to love. The year holds, she says, not as comfort as audit. Then the door at the far end opens, and a messenger the gods did not send steps through. He is barefoot, dusty, and mortal. He bows with the awkward grace of a man who has practiced bowing for an occasion he hoped would never arrive. Speak, Hera says gently, because someone in this room must always choose gentleness. The oath, he says, and his voice breaks on the second word like bread broken by unsteady hands. My king swore on the river, on the Styx. He broke it before the ink dried. The torches do not flare. The stone does not groan. Instead, the ring of Othrys grows warmer under your palms, and the room tastes, briefly, of iron rain. The Styx does not arrive with spectacle. She arrives as a subtraction. Zeus's shoulders feel a fraction heavier, as if the scepter asked for one more finger to hold it true. Hermes's usual 3 possible exits look, for a heartbeat, like 2. Hestia hears a draft where there is none and answers by lifting the room's warmth 1 degree. Hera's eyes sharpen. Name, she says to the mortal. He speaks it, a king of a city-state whose walls are tall and whose courts are new, with a name history has not yet decided to remember. What oath? Athena asks, voice made of linen stretched on a frame. That he would hold the festival in full measure, that he would weigh grain with fair stones, that he would pay the soldiers and not pay the statues. The mortal swallows. He swore, by the river, that he would not tax the widows to lights his halls. He swore, and the ink was still damp when the collections began. Demeter does not look at Zeus when she says, widows are my jurisdiction when the field is stingy. Zeus does not flinch. The penalty is known, he says softly. An oath on Styx, broken, withdraws immortality's breath. 9 years, 9 seasons of God-hunger denied. The well-known clause, mortals do not bear it, gods do. It is how gods are reminded not to play with words. Hermes tilts his head, listening for the shape of the river in the air. Styx is awake, he says. But this is a mortal king. Styx has another clause, Hades murmurs. For the breaker's house, not death. Something harsher, loss of reputation before loss of breath. He says it with no relish. Oaths are the fence lines of his craft. When one sags, a field fails. Punishment is a loud teacher. Consequence is the teacher people actually learn from. Athena turns to the mortal, softer now. Why did he break it? Because he wanted to look like a god, the man says, before fear or loyalty can censor him. He wanted the hall bright and the trumpets long. He wanted the festival to sound like steel, not barley. Hestia's mouth does not frown. It warms the word barley until it feels like blessing. We will visit, she says. Not all of us, Hera adds. This is not a stage. Zeus nods. Pairs. We keep to our rule. Athena looks to Hermes. You and I, she says. We will see what was said, what was done, and what can be unsaid and undone. Hermes smiles the exact smile of a door that's been promised a hand that knows its hinge. I have a cloak that makes me look like a clerk, he says. It works even in sunlight. You walk in through the market, because markets tell the truth faster than palaces do. The city's bones are handsome, streets that meet like friends, not enemies, walls that believe in stones more than in speeches, fountains that count by drops and do not hurry. But the air has a new habit. It tries to taste like victory at breakfast. Athena does not draw attention by hiding. She walks as if she belongs to the angle of doorways, and doorways agree. Hermes is already everywhere, which is his trick. They ask questions of people who sell weights and people who use them. They listen to a woman weighing onions against a stone that has a chip. Nobody protested yesterday, but everyone notices today. They watch a boy run errands. Boys turn city concerns into straight lines. At the edge of the square, a proclamation board is cluttered with news and the remains of yesterday's arguments. The king's scribe has hand like an archer, strong, accurate, occasionally arrogant. Athena reads aloud under her breath. By oath on the river, let it be known the festival will be held in full measure, that those who sell shall sell fair, that the army will stand proud, and that all citizens will contribute for the glory of the city and its gods. Hermes taps the last phrase. There. Glory, Athena says, tasting the consonants. A word that eats. Most broken promises begin by feeding the wrong noun. They follow the money. It leads, as money does, to steps that echo and anterooms that smell of wax. The king sits at a table heavy enough to drag the room's center of gravity toward itself. He wears his seriousness like armor and his fear like a new boot that rubs. He recognizes Athena without admitting it. Gods do not always announce themselves, but rooms identify them. Lady, he says, and begins to stand. Sit, she returns, kindly, because standing would make him perform. We came for the oath. He swallows once, as if swallowing could make the ink dry faster. We must keep the city's glory. The river heard, Hermes says lightly, and a draft passes his voice just then so that the word river sounds wet. The king's eyes flick to a basin in the corner, not quite seeing water, completely feeling consequence. Athena lays a simple weight on the table. It is not gold. It is the exact stone used in the market this morning, the one with the chip. This weighs less than its name, she says. You asked widows to balance their lives against it. The river is not interested in your results. She is interested in your method. He tries anger on as if it were a cloak that has gone out of fashion. Our enemies must see us bright. Your widows must see at night, Athena says. And your soldiers must see in front of their feet. Trumpets are loud. Shoes are useful. She does not raise her voice. She does not need to. Usefulness is the only volume she trusts. Demeter's envoy, who has joined them without managing to appear, sets a ledger on the table open to the column where onions and coins negotiate. Numbers, she says, and the king shivers because numbers do not applaud. A city cannot be both louder and truer at the same time without learning subtraction. We can unask, Hermes offers, because Hermes always keeps a map with a back door. Write a new proclamation. Use the same ink. Words know how to become better versions of themselves if invited. The king looks, briefly, like a boy who has been told he can fix what he broke. Then pride arrives with trumpet player shoulders, and he hesitates. I swore already. Athena holds his gaze without making it a duel. And you can swear again. This time on the hearth. Some oaths steer battle. Some oaths keep soup from burning. Hestia is not in the room. The room smells faintly of her anyway. He nods. Not large, not dramatic. A nod that will fit in a ledger. We unask, he says. We pay the soldiers. We weigh with whole stones. He reaches for the stylus like a man reaching for a friend's hand in the dark. Back on Olympus, Hades listens for the river's reply, and the underworld answers by not answering. That is approval. The penalty for divine perjury remains as written, 9 years without the breath of immortality, enforced with exactness when a god is the breaker. For mortals, reputation falls before walls do. Here, a king's rumor begins to repair itself. He unasked. People say, shrugging toward forgiveness. Shrugs, in politics, are powerful. Styx moves in her own calendar. She does not forget. If the king backslides, if he finds new trumpets to polish with script scraped from the bottom of pans, she will send the smaller penalty first, miscounted sleep. He will start waking at the wrong hour and find his appetite confused. Oaths require practical punishment or they grow into theater. Styx is not a theater. She is a ledger written in water, and water does not erase, it edits. Consequence is patient. That is why it wins. Hermes returns to the ring with the news, and Hera allows herself the luxury of a single relieved breath that no one is invited to notice. Demeter's envoy adds a neat note at the bottom of the column. Rectified, observe for relapse. Athena sets the chipped stone on the Othry's ring and presses it until it stops rocking. The chip settles into a vein of gold and looks, suddenly, like an old scar properly healed. All of this happens while something else, larger, older, more personal, finishes happening overhead. You have been walking in the basement of a birth. Now the stair begins. You hear it first as silence organized differently. The way a room listens when a name it will never forget is about to take up residence. In the colonnade where Zeus stood earlier, Hephaestus lowers the hammer. Hera steadies the air with her hand still on the bowl of the room. Hestia keeps heat at the exact degree where courage continues to taste like courage and not like bravado. The wedge has spoken. The syllable has turned inside out. The door has been made in the wall that asked for it. This is not the moment to look directly. It is the moment to hear the oath the house takes on itself. We will shelter this arrival without tipping. We will hold quiet enough that her first glance does not feel like effort. We will agree, as columns and cornices and torch brackets, to be furniture for an idea. Historians still argue whether Zeus's promise not to be overthrown by the child of Metis is fulfilled or broken here. Some say he dodged overthrow by making the threat his ally. Others claim prophecy cannot be dodged, only obeyed with better choreography. Athena appears and the throne remains, they write in careful hands, and then, heated, at what cost? Whose body? They are right to argue. If a myth does not offend you somewhere, you have not yet found where it plans to change you. Some oaths are kept by changing what keeping means. Down in the city that wanted trumpets, a craftsman removes a wobble from a chair by planing a single shaving from one leg. He has never met Athena and never will, but he has been touched by an aftershock of her birth, the pleasure of error corrected without melancholy. In the same town, a widow weighs onions on a scale that matches its name, and she nods once, as if to someone at the end of a long table who did what was necessary so soup would be, if not plentiful, then honest. At the harbor, the buoy hums its two tones, question and answer, and the harbor master hums back in a voice that has become steadier since morning. Out at sea, a ship turns its prow a shade to starboard because the water has decided to try a different sentence. The turn costs them nothing and saves them something they will never know they almost lost. On the mountain saddle, the shepherd watches a fox stop at the path and look both ways before crossing. He laughs quietly and tells the shrine, "Good." The shrine does not nod, but the wind breaks into fewer knives. The proof that a vow still holds is the moment small things become easier without a reason. By evening, the author's ring has cooled from attention to mere dignity. The chipped stone sits in its vein like a ring in a finger made for it. Hera adjusts it one more slip of a breath. Demeter leaves a sprig of mint on the table, a private sacrament for the business of keeping things honest. Hermes has 3 errands and a 4th that will make all 3 look clever. Hestia rinses the ugly cup and sets it upside down to dry where whoever needs it next will reach for it without thanking anyone. Zeus steps to the parapet and looks into a sky that has learned a new border without redrawing the map. His profile is, for once, not concerned with being God-shaped. It is concerned with being useful. In his skull, the last ache of a wedge becomes the first ease of a mind relieved of pressure. He is thinking a thought he did not have room for before. It looks like restraint when a storm is tempted. It looks like listening when a decree is free to shout. Hades, passing through the edge of torchlight, says to him without stopping, "The door is good." Zeus answers without looking over, "So is the house." A kingdom remains one when the carpenter and the weather agree. Night spreads in a thin, generous layer. In the coastal valley, a fisherman steps into a boat that knows him and pushes off without ceremony. In the market town, a child falls asleep to the sound of a fountain counting slower now, happier now. On the mountain saddle, a star appears in a place a star has been meaning to appear for a year and a day. In the hall of the ring, the black stone holds the day's fingerprints a little longer, the way a good page holds ink. You place your palm on it one more time. The heat has gone, the warmth remains. Above, a first footstep that is not yours but will soon lead you, Athena's, crosses a threshold that invented itself to fit her stride. You do not rush to greet her. You honor the bargain you made with this story at the beginning, to breathe with it, not at it. The broken oath has been repaired in one house and kept in another. The river is satisfied for now. The year turns. Tomorrow, a new geometry will ask for your attention. Angles that protect, laws that do not wobble, wisdom that learns how to speak softly enough to be obeyed. For tonight, stand in a doorway that remembers how it became one. The next room is lit. Go when invited. Olympus does not sleep, but it does slow when something new is added to its architecture. The echo of Athena's arrival is still traveling along the marble ribs of the palace when the summons goes out. Not to the lesser halls, not to the feasting terraces, but to the central chamber where the Megas Symbolion meets, the grand council of immortals. This is not a place for idle chatter. The floor here is older than Olympus itself, a slab of primordial basalt lifted from the seabed by Poseidon when the world was still cooling. The torches in the corners are tended by no hand. They burn from oils that never diminish, lit once in the dawn of the gods. The air hums faintly, not music, but the residue of the first agreements ever made. One by one, they arrive. Poseidon first, hair wet with the salt of his court, trident resting against his shoulder like a shepherd's crook. Hera follows, robes settling around her like well-trained waves. Apollo enters with sunlight trailing from his shoulders, Artemis with a scent of pine shadowing her steps. Hermes is already here, naturally, tilting back in his seat as if it had been built for him alone. From the shadowed archway, Hades steps in, his presence dimming the gold on the walls to a more contemplative hue. Demeter enters moments later, bringing with her a breeze that smells of tilled earth and wheat. Dionysus, late, as is his prerogative, slips in smelling of ripe grapes and night laughter. Last comes Zeus, not in a hurry but in that careful, deliberate pace of a ruler who knows every eye is measuring him. Athena walks at his side, newly born yet fully formed, the glint in her eyes suggesting she already knows more than anyone has yet told her. Even in a hall of gods, there is always someone who has the freshest memory of mortality, and that is the one everyone should watch. Zeus raises his hand, not to silence them, but to anchor the room. Today, he begins, Olympus has gained both a sword and a shield. His gaze brushes Athena before it moves across the table. She comes not from conquest, but from necessity. Not from a wound, but from an answer to prophecy. Poseidon leans forward. And what of the prophecy, brother? Has it been fulfilled, or merely postponed? Zeus meets his eyes without blinking. It has been rewritten. A murmur runs around the table. Gods are not used to the idea of rewriting fate, they are used to delivering it. Athena's voice, clear but without arrogance, interrupts. A prophecy is a map drawn for a world that no longer exists. If you walk it without looking up, you fall into rivers that have changed their course. Hermes grins, liking her already. But not all faces are agreeable. Ares sits back, arms crossed. If she is a sword, let her be tested in war. Your war. Artemis snaps back. Not every weapon is meant to cut flesh. Some are meant to cut lies. Demeter leans in. And some wars are fought in the planting season, Ares. Your testing would scorch the fields before the harvest. Hades speaks then, voice low enough that everyone leans closer to hear. You all speak of testing her as though she were a tool. She is not. She is a presence. A mind. The question is not what she can do, but what she will choose to do when the moment comes. Athena meets his gaze. And the answer to that, she says, is not for today. Wisdom does not arrive to satisfy curiosity. It arrives to decide which curiosities deserve to live. Once the brief storm passes, Zeus turns to other matters. Oaths broken in mortal realms. Borders shifting where the sea meets land. The rising of omens in the east. Black-winged birds flying in geometric patterns no wind should allow. Hermes reports on the mortal king whose promise was recently repaired, and how the city has steadied. Apollo speaks of a fever in the southern isles that weakens men for 9 days and 9 nights, yet leaves them with dreams they swear are messages. Poseidon warns of a fault line deep beneath the ocean that groans louder each month. Athena listens more than she speaks, storing each fact like a builder gathering stones for a wall not yet needed. When the meeting recesses, Hera draws Athena aside. You should know, Hera says, that prophecy has a long memory. Just because it wears a different shape today does not mean it has lost its hunger. Athena inclines her head. And you should know, Hera, that hunger is easier to outweak than pride. For a heartbeat, they measure one another, not as enemies, but as two strategists mapping the same terrain from opposite hillsides. As the gods depart, Zeus lingers at the basalt table, fingertips grazing the ancient surface. Athena stands beside him, the silence between them more telling than any declaration. Finally, Zeus speaks, not to command, but to acknowledge. You are the first I have met who was born knowing my weaknesses. And the first you did not try to bury for it, Athena replies. He smiles faintly. Let's keep it that way. In the House of Immortals, survival is not about who holds the most power. It is about who understands the price of using it. You return to the balcony where dawn once wore the color of hammered brass, and today the light is pewter, soft, undecided, attentive. The air tastes of rain that has not committed, pine that has not confessed, and a far-off flicker of sea salt that arrives without gulls. Beneath your hands, marble keeps the nights cool, a temperature made for thinking. Somewhere in the near distance, a lyre station hums its calibration note. Farther out, a buoy answers, a low, faithful syllable. Between those two sounds a quieter pulse persists, the old heartbeat you have carried since the cave, now braided with others. The stone that fooled a king, the river that learned to listen, the seasons that keep their word. The world is steady enough to make a change audible. A shadow does not need darkness. It needs doubt. You inhale and the breath feels like an inventory, of clouds, of tasks, of thresholds that ask to be checked by hand. Olympus has learned to plan. It has not yet learned to suspect itself. The first omen is polite. A swallow lands on the parapet at your elbow and refuses to blink. The second is less so. A breeze that smells like wet iron and ovens gone cold passes through the colonnade and does not belong to any kitchen. The third is not an omen at all but a memory. The way the ground held its breath the night a child was not swallowed, the way a hall steadied when a queen ate seeds meant to hold her, the way a skull became a door. Patterns do not announce what they mean. They offer you a chair and wait for you to sit. You walk the long corridor to the great hall and feel the floor under you think. Stone remembers the Titans, not with affection, but with geologic accuracy. In the Authry's ring, gold veins look a touch too awake, as if a dream is trying to use them as a mouth. Hestia's ugly cup sits where a night hand left it to dry, upside down, patient. A small draft explores the room without making a show of itself. Hera enters first, housekeeping in motion, then Zeus, the storm-braided tight enough to be restrained. Reports, he says, the word soft, like a carpenter's thumb on a surface he trusts. Hermes, obliging as always, has 3 to hand and a 4th that explains the other 3. A cave on the Cilician coast that hasn't hosted a flame since the age of the sickle now breathes smoke. No fire, just breath. On Naxos, the wind turned back on itself twice and came ashore undecided. In Arcadia, shepherds found footprints larger than boasting. Boasting is a unit of measure? Athena murmurs, arriving with her spear and a calm that makes the torches less nervous. In Arcadia, Hermes says. Yes. Demeter's envoy adds 1 datum, square as a window, barley in 3 valleys bent against the wind and then corrected itself. No damage. Just a lesson. Hades's presence cools the room a single degree. The gates hold. The dead do not include anything with feet that large. Poseidon, wet to the eyebrows and smug about it, leans a trident against the ring. My markers hummed in thirds. Tides negotiated fair, then asked if they could invite an old friend. Which? Hera says, already unamused. The seabed itself, Poseidon answers. It wants attention. Before a giant appears, the ground practices hosting him. Athena slides her thread map onto the ring and weights it with hematite beads. Where 3 gold lines cross, Delphi, Eleusis, Isthmus, nothing is wrong, which is useful. Where the map is blank, the threads still pull. She taps coastal Cilicia, the island, the Arcadian hills. Edges again, she says. Thresholds that want to be doors. Zeus lets his hand rest on the scepter without summoning weather. We do not make more doors, he says. Not today, Hera. Then we guard the ones we have. Hestia turns the cup upright. It looks ready. At dusk you leave the high halls for a ridge where the horizon is an honest line. You have stood here before, when the year pledged itself to motion, when the councils practiced being useful. Today the ground under the pine needles is warm in patches and cold in others, as if heat is looking for something it lost. You feel it before you name it. Not unrest, not rebellion, remembered ownership. The earth belongs to gods because gods made a habit of saying so. The earth belongs to itself because it was here first. Between those truths lies a bed where something old could turn over and ask to be counted. A shepherd pauses on the trail and sets his hand to a boulder, then draws it back as if the stone barked. A mason in a city-state far from here taps a wall with his knuckles and hears a new hollow. In a temple, a priest has a dream of roots that braid themselves into a rope and tries to decide if ropes are for pulling or climbing. None of this is yet a threat. All of it is practice. The past does not knock. It resumes. Above you clouds learn a darker grammar, clauses longer than storm, punctuation that prefers periods to exclamation points. Zeus tastes the air and the air tastes back. He looks at Athena without looking away. She nods once. Yes. Listen. News travels in 2 ways, fast by Hermes, slow by rumor that does not need feet. Hermes brings the fast. Carytian cave. Breathing like a bellows. A serpent woman guards something that is not hers. Delphine, Athena says. A lesser footnote in a larger book. Poseidon contributes a sound like a harbor testing its ropes. And in the far south, the ground made a hill where there wasn't one yesterday. How high? Zeus asks. High enough to argue with a skyline, Poseidon says, enjoying the poetry more than he will admit. The hill moved, Hermes adds, as if offering a dessert no one ordered. Hera's eyes narrow. We have seen tricks of shape. We have not seen hills move since. Since hills were young, Hades finishes for her. He looks past the walls, as if expecting an appointment to arrive on the minute. If it is what we think, it will not head for our doors directly. It will learn the room first. It will shake the table and study what rattles. A monster that studies you is more dangerous than a monster that charges. Zeus raises the scepter a thumb's width and lowers it again. Positions, he says. It is not panic. It is choreography. Pairs, as we agreed. Hermes with Athena. Artemis with Apollo. Poseidon with Athena. Poseidon challenges, almost smiling. Yourself, Hera says, and the smile leaves him as if taught manners. You, sea. Stay with sea. He shrugs in a way that moves 3 tides. As you wish, Demeter. I'll keep the granaries honest. Terror makes thieves. Thieves make famine. She leaves like a mother who knows that supper is part of war. Hestia. I'll keep the lamps from panicking. Lamps panic more than people know, she knows. Hades. I'll watch the hinges. It is both joke and policy. You are assigned to walk with Athena, not to guard her. Gods are not escorted, but to witness the way she conducts a threshold when it wants to misbehave. She takes the stairs that prefer thought to speed. Hermes is already beside her, cloak doing its clever thing where it looks like everything rooms expect. The cave's mouth has learned decorum since men first told its story. It smells of wet lime and bat dust, and a thread of sulfur like a rumor of eggs. Delphine coils where columns drip. Her eyes are coins that never accepted commerce. Her voice is a leak that refused to be repaired. There is a bundle, Hermes says softly, peering into the deeper dark. Strings, sinews. Something once attached to something important. A trove of tendons, Athena says, is not a museum exhibit. It is a theft waiting to be returned. Delphine flicks her tongue like a scribe refusing to take dictation. A mother sent me, she says. Which mother? Athena's spear rests almost casually against her shoulder. The earth, Delphine answers, and she is old enough to speak without introducing herself. You feel the cave's floor tilt a degree toward a larger name. Gaia, who does not need counsels to announce that her interests are ancestral, wants representation. She has sent a clerk who can bite. When the earth hires a lawyer, she does not choose a talker. She chooses a set of teeth. Athena does the opposite of many gods. She lowers her weapon. You guard, she says to the serpent. Guard well. But know this, if the strings you keep belong to a hand that governs the weather, we will need them returned. The sky will not negotiate without a wrist. Delphine smiles in the way snakes approximate. If your sky loses what he holds, perhaps he learns to hold better. Hermes leans in. We could exchange, he suggests. Information for sinew. Names for strings. You have been asked to represent. We have been asked to continue. Delphine's tongue tastes the air as if it might contain a footnote. Later, she says, when the hill arrives, when your halls shake, then we discuss how many fingers a god really needs. The cave breathes. You leave not victorious and not empty-handed. You leave with an appointment and a new idea of the size of the thing you will have to negotiate. Hills that move, strings that can be stolen, a mother who remembers previous tenants. Static sentence. Outside, the pines hold still and let the mountain decide what to say next. It chooses evening. It always does. Monsters prefer good lighting. Audiences deserve to see what they fear. On the southern horizon, a new line rises. No taller than a story, then a wall, then a bluff that blots constellations as if they were chalk. It is not a cloud, and not a mountain, and not a metaphor. It is a body of land that has recruited lightning to do its hair. Typhon. Some will tell you he is the son of Gaia and Tartarus, revenge for children buried under thunder. Others will insist Hera, insulted by Athena's birth, breathed on the ground until the ground breathed back and named the result husbandless. Historians will argue over parentage as if it changes how tall a hill is. You may enjoy the argument later. Tonight the only useful fact is that a piece of earth has chosen to stand and walk and insist. Etiology is for libraries. Feet are for now. He is many in one, shoulders like ranges, arms like peninsulas, hands that end in valleys, hair that contains weather, a mouth that opens on a furnace built for bellows. His first step reintroduces sound to your bones, a bass note that makes chairs elsewhere in the world ask to be sat in. His second step drafts a wind that smells like volcano and orchard ash. He does not roar. He breathes. The breath is worse. Zeus lifts the scepter and pulls lightning to him with the authority of a conductor tired of flutes. The strike hits and parts across Typhon's back as if told to find an easier target. Poseidon hurls a wave from 100 leagues and the wave climbs his ankle and reconsiders. Apollo's arrows are accurate. They draw straight lines on a map of muscle fascinated by geometry and unpersuaded by puncture. Athena does not aim for the body. She aims for a habit. She watches the pattern of his feet and the fraction of a heartbeat between left and right. When she speaks, you almost miss it, because her voice folds into the wind that Typhon makes. "There," she says, and Zeus, unoffended to take instruction when danger voices it well, throws a bolt not at leg, not at hip, but at a pulse hidden in a stride. Typhon stumbles. Not much. Enough to remind him he is carrying himself. Hades speaks a word you cannot hear. The ground around Olympus firms. The rivers below agree to stay in their beds. Hermes runs messages that are more like corrections. Lower the banner. Move the oxen. Count again before you panic. Panic later if you must, but count now. Demeter goes to the granaries and stands with her hand on a door. The door does not rattle. Hestia goes to the kitchens and lowers every flame 1 finger width, so that when panic wants to knock pots to the floor, the pots will already be moved. Static sentence. In a farmhouse nowhere near the front, a woman wraps bread in a cloth and sets it exactly where a hand will find it in the dark. The battle is not glorious. It is administrative. Holding lines. Adjusting angles. Teaching a god the timing of a joint. But Typhon watches too, and he has an old tutor. Gaia whispers up his spine the way a root learns its tree. He feints a third step and, in that learned pause, he reaches. Not for the scepter, not for the crown. For the hand. You see it not with your eyes but with the flinch of the room. Zeus's arm drops a fraction as if weight doubled. Fingers as faithful as seasons forget their orders. Somewhere in the Carytian cave, a bundle suddenly feels heavier in Delphine's coils. Strings. Hermes breathes, horrified and admiring. Typhon laughs, and the laugh is dirt sliding convincingly. Zeus does not fall. He does not fly. He stands like a man who suddenly understands how many things his wrist did for him when it went unthanked. Poseidon roars inconveniently, and waves crash on cliffs that are far too pleased with themselves. Apollo plays louder, as if music can shame a ligament back into service. Artemis puts an arrow through Typhon's ear and makes him turn his head. That buys a moment of not stomping. Athena steps nearer, spear still lowered, eyes thinking so furiously you can hear gears. Hades, from a shadow that acts like a colleague, says, "We need theft." Hermes grins at last. "At your service," he says, and is gone into the draft that Delphine left in her sentence. Bravery is loud. Cunning arrives dressed as permission. You follow Hermes as well as anyone can follow a rumor in motion. The Carytian cave opens like an argument you intend to win by letting the other speaker tire. Delphine is already saying no with her body. "Lovely," Hermes says, circling, cloak adjusting his edges to look like whatever a serpent expects to see near dinner time. Debate in spondees, perhaps? No. Dactyls. He distracts as he moves, and while he distracts, another figure, half goat, half laugh, slips in along the wall. Japan. Lesser known, beloved by stories that enjoy telling you who held the lantern while heroes gestured. Delphine strikes at Hermes and bites cloak. He yelps dutifully. Japan leaps, graceful as Panic's better cousin, and butts her temple with a head built for mountainside negotiations. Hermes does not waste the headbutt. He picks the lock of coils that guard the bundle, and rolls free with strings that sing unpleasantly in his hands. "Pardon," he says, meaning it. Wrong shelf. They do not kill Delphine. They do not need to. They leave with a promise that is not a bribe. When the room stops shaking, you will be asked to guard something worth your teeth. Static sentence. Outside the cave, the air tastes like lime and victory that remembers to be humble. Hermes runs with the tendons wrapped like contraband and arrives at a parapet ready to apologize for being exactly on time. Ajapan arrives a heartbeat later carrying the look of someone who has found his purpose in making other people's courage efficient. Zeus accepts what is his without dramatics, and fits himself together with the patience of a man repairing a hinge in an empty house. He flexes once, twice. The wrist remembers its profession. The next bolt he throws lands on the rhythm Athena named, and Typhon stumbles into his own confusion. Monsters have logistics too. Typhon steps reverse not because he is afraid of light, but because he understands valleys. He backs toward ravines that will widen to receive him, and toward a hinterland where joints are less honest. The horizon swallows a hill one mouthful at a time. He does not vanish. He chooses a vantage. Poseidon wants to pursue. He is a cliff, he argues. And I have always been unkind to cliffs. Hera shakes her head. Let him consider. We have houses to count. Zeus, flexing his hand as if testing the length of a promise, says, we do not chase land into its own advantage. We teach it to understand the price of movement. Athena, we build listening where he plans to step next. Apollo, we tune for the pitch of his breath when he pauses. Artemis, we post on ridges where his wind cannot lie. Hades, we strengthen hinges. Demeter, we post notices in markets that say open as usual and mean it. Hestia, we keep soup from tasting like fear. Victory is not a spear in a throat. It is bread on a table the night after. The days that follow are not heroic. They are superb. Lyre stations converse with buoys. Shrines keep their square. In the cities, men who wanted trumpets learned to mend sandals properly. In fields, women who count onions teach officials what numbers are for. A stone in a public square that liked to wobble is planed with a smile. Hermes invents a form letter that begins, we are aware of the situation. Continue to sweep. Please hum this interval if the buoy hums back. It comforts more people than any statue could. Scholars at long tables sharpen papyri with citations. Was Typhon a late addition to a mythic ecology already busy with giants? Is he a storm mountain married to a snake cave, or a political allegory for islands resisting mainland calendars? One writes with breathless confidence that the episode encodes an Egyptian borrowing. Typhon equals Set, Zeus equals the better weather of foreigners, Delphine equals a friendly local goddess demoted by clever editors. Another points out calmly that mountains move in stories because mountains do not move in life, and people need a way to explain why a horizon can feel like a door. They disagree and do not bleed. This is progress. Lesser known detail. In one village, children play a new game called strings, in which one child must cross a yard while others tug gently at their wrists with ribbons. The point is not to stop, but to keep moving without hurting anyone. Mothers watch from doorways and try not to look as proud as they feel. Static sentence. At night, the sky returns to its usual inventory of stars and leaves room between them for choices. On Olympus, council learns a slower pace. The Othries ring is not a drum now, it is a table. Hera and Hestia arrange chairs so that no one must shout to be heard, politics disguised as furniture. Poseidon brings maps and is patient with measurements. Apollo hums quietly until a plan resonates. Artemis draws a line where patrols should turn back toward warm beds. Demeter and Athena become a formidable pair. One keeps ledgers, the other keeps laws from wobbling. Hermes edits minutes as if they were poems. Zeus sits differently, less like weather waiting to be asked and more like a beam that trusts a wall. When he speaks, he leaves room between sentences for people to think. This is new. People notice. No one says anything aloud because saying it would make it less useful. Persephone arrives on one of her above days and stands behind Hades, resting 2 fingers on the back of his chair. She hears the word Typhon, and does not change expression. She hears the word market, and smiles the way a window smiles when a breeze finds it. The council keeps its tempo. The world keeps its bargain. The surest sign a house is strong is the absence of voices trying to be louder than chairs. You step onto the parapet with Zeus when the day decides to be brass again. He rolls his repaired wrist as if loosening an argument. Lightning gathers at his shoulder the way dogs gather at a hunter's heel and then sit because they are well trained. Sometimes, he says without looking at you, force is a reminder to the hand of what it can do. The danger is in liking the reminder. You say nothing. He has not asked for anything but a witness. Athena will build walls that make sense, he continues. Hera will keep rooms honest. Hestia will keep water hot. Demeter will count. Poseidon will hum. Hermes will arrive. I will be asked to be interruption. I need to remember how to stop. History argues. You venture, feeling the prophecy move like a cat against your ankles, that you have not always remembered. History is right, he says, and for a long time he lets the admission hang like a wind chime that has earned its sound. But houses learn. Static sentence. The wind moves through the colonnade and fails to find a plate to knock down. Evening again. The hill that learned to walk has chosen to sit. He sits far enough away that farmers tell stories about it without pointing with fear. He is breathing. So are you. So are we all. In the valley Persephone touched on the map long ago, a fisherman hums the buoy's interval, and the buoy hums back like a friend who cannot write letters but always opens the door. On a ridge in Arcadia, a shrine stone keeps it square. A fox looks both ways like a citizen. In a market town, a fountain counts in the correct key. Lamps burn with the confidence of small, well-kept promises. You look down the long spine of Olympus and see what shadows do when they are not fed. They keep cool things cool, they offer edges clarity, they give depth to rooms that would otherwise be flat. Shadows over Olympus, yes, but behaving shadows, curated shadows, shadows that remember being wild and choose employment. What remains is the watch. Not heroic, not brief. Chairs adjusted to the right distances. Ledgers kept. Lyres tuned. Buoys taught to hum. Doors that read footsteps and open without surprise. A cave with a disappointed snake waiting for a new assignment. A hill that will someday stand again to make sure you still know how to count. A hand that will remember to stop before it remembers to strike. You do not rehearse fear. You rehearse maintenance. This is how gods last longer than their stories, by keeping a soft perimeter that refuses to clap for panic. The heartbeat from the cave returns and finds you where you stand. It does not order. It invites. You accept. The dawn after Typhon's retreat arrives not with relief, but with the quiet weight of a debt unpaid. Olympus is still standing, the walls unbroken, the altars warm. Yet there's a scent in the air, a faint trace of scorched earth and something older, like dust from a sealed chamber that has been opened for the first time in centuries. You stand with Athena on a balcony where the marble is still cool under your palm. The wind from the east brushes past your cheek, carrying a whisper that feels deliberate. From here you can see the long, sharp silhouette of the hill where Typhon chose to rest. He has not vanished. He has not surrendered. He has simply paused. And pauses in war are often more dangerous than battles. Victory may silence the roar, but it leaves the echo, and echoes are patient. Athena watches without blinking, her eyes narrowing in calculation. He's learning, she says. You ask, learning what? That we can resist him, she answers. And how we do it. Which means he'll return knowing more than we do. She turns and walks back into the council chamber, the rhythm of her steps matching the sharp click of bronze against stone. You follow, hearing in that sound not just confidence, but urgency. The Othries' ring gleams in the morning light. All 12 thrones are occupied, though not all by willing bodies. Zeus leans forward, his repaired wrist resting on the scepter, fingers flexing as if testing their loyalty. Hera's gaze is sharp enough to cut marble. Poseidon sits like a wave held back by a dam. Hermes, ever the messenger, stands at the center with a scroll of reports. His voice is steady, but the contents are not. Cities near the southern coast report tremors, mild, but constant. A spring in Corinth has begun to run warm. Shepherds in Arcadia have found their flocks uneasy. And he pauses, glancing at Zeus. There are sightings of strangers on the roads, taller than men, faces hidden, carrying no weapons, yet walking as if they have a destination that does not appear on any map. Hades speaks without moving his head. Scouts. Athena nods. Typhon will not come alone next time. The worst enemies rarely knock on the front gate. They arrive in the marketplace wearing patience like a cloak. Demeter places a hand on the table. If strangers walk our roads, then they will pass our fields. And if they pass our fields, they will measure them. This is not a time for fear, it is a time for counting. Zeus raises the scepter slightly. Then count. Count everything. Grain, ships, horses, spears, voices that can carry a warning. No piece of Olympus, no city under its shadow, is too small to matter now. Later, in the colonnade, you find Zeus alone. He's staring toward the horizon, his jaw tight, as if wrestling with an argument only he can hear. Do you know, he begins, why kings grow cruel? You wait. It's not because they enjoy it. Cruelty is efficient. It buys obedience quickly. It silences the voice that says, what if? But every time you buy obedience with fear, you sell a piece of trust. And without trust, a king stands alone when the hill starts walking. Fear builds walls faster than trust, but trust is the only thing that holds them. He turns, the light catching in his eyes. We won yesterday because the others moved without waiting for me to speak. That is not obedience. That is faith. And faith, unlike fear, cannot be stolen by a serpent in a cave. You see in his face a truth that rulers rarely admit, that power borrowed from others is more precious and more fragile than any weapon forged by gods. If Zeus is the hand that strikes, Hera is the mind that keeps the blow from falling in the wrong place. You find her in the eastern wing, standing over a table scattered with tokens, maps, and small bronze figures. She is arranging them in a pattern that is part strategy, part accounting. These, she says, pointing to the tokens shaped like houses, are loyal because of blood ties. These, small amphorae, because they trade with us. And these, carved birds, because they fear the alternative. What about the ones who are neither loyal, nor bound, nor afraid? You ask. They are the most dangerous, she answers without hesitation. Because they are free to choose. And choice, for a ruler, is always a risk. A throne is never threatened most by enemies, it's threatened by those who could walk away. Hera sweeps a row of figures into a small wooden box. When Typhon returns, he will not only strike at walls. He will strike at loyalties. The hill does not need to crush Olympus if Olympus crumbles from the inside. Athena calls a smaller meeting in the Hall of Maps. A great sheet of parchment covers the table, marked with colored threads and pins. She places her finger on 3 points: Delphi, Rhodes, and the Cretan mountains. These, she says, will be our listening posts. Not fortresses. Fortresses invite siege. These will be eyes and ears. Every tremor, every unnatural wind, every footprint too large, reported instantly. Hermes grins. Messenger stations. Intelligence stations, Athena corrects. And they will be manned by those who know when to fight and when to vanish. The sharpest spear is the one you never have to throw. Zeus approves with a nod. Hera does not smile, but she moves one of her carved birds to each marked location. That is her way of agreeing. At sunset, Poseidon summons you to the shore. The waves are restless, slapping against the rocks without rhythm. The sea, he says, knows more than the land will admit. Something moves beneath Typhon, something that does not belong to him, but serves him anyway. I have heard its voice in the trenches. It speaks of drowning cities and of rivers that will reverse their course. You ask what it is. He shakes his head. If I name it, it will hear. And if it hears, it will rise before we are ready. Some truths are weapons, and drawing them too early cuts the hand that holds them. That night, in the quiet hours, you dream, or perhaps you wake, to a voice in the dark. It is low, patient, and vast. It speaks not in threats, but in reminders. Thrones, it says, are never owned. They are rented, and the rent is always due. You open your eyes to the silence of Olympus, the marble cold beneath your fingers. Somewhere, far to the south, the hill shifts slightly in its sleep. Power is never free. The question is only who sends the bill. Hello again. You arrive where breath learns to be careful. The air has a taste tonight, a solemn one. Cooled bronze, laurel rubbed between finger and thumb, the faint smoke of torches that know they must not flicker. From Olympus the world spreads beneath you like a ledger already opened. Fields squared into patient paragraphs, the sea turning its long pages, the hill in the south sitting like a question with elbows on the table. Your palm on the marble finds lingering décolleté. Your other hand rests over your ribs, where the old heartbeat you've carried since the cave keeps time with a new, quieter measure. You know this rhythm. It's the sound of a bargain arriving. Wars end in noise, eras begin in terms. You follow the narrow corridor whose sconces never misbehave, into the hall that has learned to be furniture. The Authry's ring receives you with its black patience. Gold veins hold steady like well-trained script. Hestia's ugly cup is upright and drying. A sprig of mint Demeter forgot to claim has made the room smell like resolve. Hera adjusts a chair the thickness of a breath. Zeus stands with his repaired wrist relaxed, scepter grounded rather than raised. Athena, spear unlifted, touches the stone as if taking the table's pulse. Hermes brings the horizon in his pockets, lyre stations humming in tune, buoys answering in their appointed vowels, shrine stones square. Poseidon has drawn lines on a wax tablet that are not boasts but measurements. Ares leans back, bored on purpose, which is his most useful discipline. Artemis's hair smells like pine and high air. Hades arrives as a temperature the torches respect. Persephone stands behind him with 2 fingers on the chairback, a gesture that means the year will keep its word while we speak. Zeus does not summon thunder. He does something harder. He waits until everyone breathes at the same depth, then says, "A bargain." Power that waits to speak is already negotiating. Terms first arrive in simple nouns. Demeter, food. She nods toward the mortal world where ovens practice the future. If hills will walk and seas will consider new moods, we must protect granary and gate. A city that eats can reason. A hungry city learns trumpets again. Hera, loyalties. She places carved birds and houses on the ring, a quiet choreography. We do not buy obedience with spectacle. We pay for steadiness with fairness. Poseidon, harbors. His trident tip taps the coastlines, Delos, Naxos, the isthmus, once, twice, not a threat, an oath of maintenance. Markers will hum, currents will report. Athena, walls and laws. She lays the thread map flat, weighting intersections with hematite. We build listening posts, not fortresses, courts that square like stones. Hades, boundaries. 2 fingers on the ring. Torches steady. Names cross on agreed nights. Bodies do not. Persephone, calendar. A softness that brooks no argument. The wheel turns as promised. Winter will rest without despair. Spring will rise without vanity. Hermes, corridors. He grins like a door that enjoys being useful. Messages will arrive the long way in case the short way sulks. Hestia, heat. She lifts the cup, sets it down. Water hot, bread warm. Fear cooks poorly. Civilization is the art of keeping soup from tasting like panic. Zeus listens until the list becomes a house. And what do we offer for the hill's restraint? He asks at last. His voice holds no theater. What does the old earth ask to feel consulted? The answer arrives on time and without flattery. Delphine stands at the threshold, coils arranged with the kind of care bureaucrats mistake for menace. She has washed the cave from her scales but kept the smell of lime for honesty. She bows to no throne and offends none. I represent not a grievance, she says, but a memory. Her tongue tests the air as if tasting punctuation. The earth asks that your building remember how she stands. No more walls that argue with rivers. No roads across the throats of hills. No seeds forced into calendars that do not match their mouths. Athena inclines her head. Agreed. Then, because bargains are not poetry, she adds, and in exchange? Restraint, Delphine says. Not silence. The hill sits, it does not lean. The seabed rumbles, it does not rise to drown a lesson. When storms are needed, they will be instructional. When silence is required, it will be ordinary. Poseidon blows out a breath that is almost a laugh. Instructional storms, he says. My favorite kind of weather. The past will accept a future if you let it finish its sentence. Delphine's coil draws a circle on the floor that is not a threat, a diagram. And you will remember the price of oaths. Hera's eyes flicker with approval. We already do. Hermes clears his throat because corridors speak through him. Mortals, he says, need their own page in this contract. They will be asked for steadiness. They must be paid in clarity. Athena, laws that don't wobble. Demeter, weights that weigh. Hestia, work that warms. Persephone, losses that mean return, not punishment. Hades, an ending that behaves. Zeus, and kings who swear by sticks, understanding that the river's patience is long and her arithmetic precise. A bargain without a human clause is decoration. Hera slides a small box forward, the one where she keeps small, corrective tokens. We will audit festivals, she says, and Hermes almost smiles because the word audit has never sounded so much like a mercy. Athena looks beyond the ring to a city not yet sure of its own adjectives. Athens will need a place where fear and vengeance stop hiring each other, she says softly. A hill of Ares repurposed, Areopagus. A court not of rage, but of reasons that can be spoken aloud. You hear a future trial taking shape, the well-known moment when Orestes will be tried and the vote will tie until Athena's ballot breaks the deadlock not toward blood, but toward law. Not tonight. But the echo begins here, in how a goddess frames a bargain. Hera nods once, rare approval visible. A court is a hearth with chairs, she says. People eat there, arguments, and sometimes bread. Justice that can be sat upon survives storms. Poseidon touches a corner of the map few mark, the Carytian slopes where Delphine keeps conscientious hours. Guardian assignments, he says. We formalize them. Aegipan, good head in a crisis, becomes lantern-bearer at contested caves. Pan's line will keep paths honest where cities end and rumors begin. Lesser-known detail, a small god with hooves earns a permanent job in the paperwork of peace, recognized not in hymns, but in posted schedules. Hermes writes the appointment with satisfaction that looks like ink. Scholars will crowd the margins later. Was Typhon Gaia's revenge or Hera's? Did Zeus's bargain surrender whether to politics? Was the underworld's new policy of name crossings a softening or a trap? They will cite Hesiod, Homeric hymns, Near Eastern borrowings. They will compare Areopagus to Near Eastern councils. They will insist Athena's birth is either a surgical strike of meaning or an allegory for absorbed feminine cunning. The debate will not end. It shouldn't. A bargain that can't be argued is propaganda. In the hall, debate becomes practice. Chairs are moved. Lamps are trimmed. Words are chosen as if they will have to hold soup. Philosophy is a room. Policy is where you put the table. Zeus lifts the scepter but does not call storm. Speak your parts, he says, and the council does, one at a time, in voices built for work. Hera, I will keep the room honest. Demeter, I will count where fear inflates numbers, and restore where pride discounted. Poseidon, I will hum to the harbors until they learn to hum back. Artemis, I will tend the ridges. Night will not pretend to be day without telling me first. Apollo, I will tune warning into music so mortals hear it without flinching. Ares, grudging but sincere, I will be sharpened and sheathed in the right order. Hermes, I will arrive and depart as if doors were made for people, not panic. Hestia, I will keep water hot. Hades, I will keep the hinges from squealing. Persephone, I will keep the wheels promise. Athena, I will draw the line straight and stop before it cuts a throat. Oaths that fit in a sentence survive their errands. Styx hears and pretends not to. The ring warms under your hand, a pleasant, not theatrical heat. A bargain is not real until it is delivered to the thing that could most easily ignore it. So you go, pairs and quiets, across the long ribs of mountain toward the southern horizon, where the hill sits with its elbows on its knees. Zeus does not fly, he walks. Athena does not brandish, she carries. Hades does not threaten, he accompanies. At the base, the air smells like kiln and orchard ash. Typhon does not roar. He exhales curiosity. The ground tilts a courtesy so your feet will keep their honesty. Zeus speaks first, with the restraint that keeps power from becoming appetite. We will not bar you from breathing, he says. We will bar you from stepping on roofs. We will not forbid the seabed to remember itself. We will forbid it to drown a city to make a point. We will square our walls with rivers and ask our roads to apologize where they must. In return, you sit until teaching is needed, not theater. A long silence follows, the kind in which Earth reviews its minutes. Typhon's answer arrives as a small, local tremor, a nod you feel more than see. The hill settles half a hand's breadth. Dust lifts and returns like a well-trained audience. Consent does not always say yes. Sometimes it moves one grain. Delphine, clerk to the ancient, scratches a neat mark in the dirt. Hermes, clerk to the moving, copies it on a tablet. The contract exists in both jurisdictions, ground and message. Because bargains die without witnesses who eat, mortals are invited, not kings who will turn it into parade, but keepers of ordinary rooms, a baker whose bread keeps soldiers from cruelty, a midwife whose hands close lifetimes gently, a harbormaster who hums to poles, a shepherd who taught a fox to look both ways by waiting, a widow who weighed onions against a stone that now sits steady. They do not speak vows. They nod in the exact places where nods are work. A child holds her mother's sleeve and watches the hill like a story that finally learned to tell itself at the right speed. Static sentence. Evening leans on the ridge and does not hurry the dark. Back on Olympus, practice begins the only way practice can, with chores. Hera posts the audit schedule and calls it hospitality. Demeter distributes new measures exact to the scar. Poseidon's markers sing their intervals and teach 3 harbors to sing back. Artemis traces a patrol that returns to warm beds before pride begins to talk. Apollo tunes a low note that means steady across the lyre net. Ares drills 100 steps no poet will sing, so that 100 panic moments will never arrive. Hermes writes a form letter mortals can read without embarrassment. Hestia moves the ugly cup to where tired hands will find it. Hades oils a hinge. Persephone checks the calendar like someone watering a plant. Epics are sustained by people who wipe tables in the right direction. Well known. On a future day, in a city that will bear her name, Athena will found a court on a rocky hill. A matricide will be tried. The vote will tie. Her ballot will shift the world from blood to law. Tonight's bargain plants that tree. Lesser known, Japan, whose head but opened a path in a conscientious cave, receives an unglamorous post in the divine ledger, keeper of lanterns on mountain paths. Fewer travelers freeze, fewer arguments flare. He will be thanked mostly by silence. Argued forever. Was Typhon a rebel or a reminder? Did Zeus capitulate or mature? Are the seeds Persephone 8 chains or keys? Your answer will reveal not the past but the shape of your hope. The bargain allows you to argue and still eat. Night lowers with 2 hands, careful not to smudge. In the coastal valley, the buoy hums the interval that now means all right. On the saddle, a shrine stone refuses to wobble as a point of pride. In a market town, a fountain counts without showing off. On the hill, a giant listens to his own breath and learns, to his surprise, that he prefers this pace. Inside the hall, the author's ring keeps the room together like a wedding band around a finger that no longer clenches. Zeus sets the scepter down where wood won't scar. Hera's ledger closes with the soft thump of a room satisfied with its numbers. Athena's spear leans quietly in a corner. Tools, when they are well used, learn to nap. You place your palm on the stone. Warm. Not from drama. From hands. The future begins when heat comes from practice, not from fire. You step out into a night that doesn't ask for bravery. The sky is generous with stars but not greedy with them. There is space between light for rest. The air smells like cool bread and a wick pinched cleanly out. Work done, flames spared the indignity of sputter. Below, the world lies the way a good blanket lies, tucked where it should be, loose where you need to turn over. Listen. The heartbeat you've carried since the cave is slower now, not from fatigue, from agreement. It matches the soft clink of a cup set down in a kitchen, the patient rasp of a whetstone drawn once and no more than once. The rhythm of feet that know the way home without rehearsing it. The prophecy, noisy in its youth, has grown polite. It clears its throat only to remind you to look where you place the next kindness. Somewhere a hill sits still and calls that stillness strength. Somewhere a river remembers names out loud and sends them back whole. Somewhere a court begins to exist because a city has decided to be braver than its anger. Doors breathe. Lamps learn the modest miracle of staying lit only as long as needed. A hinge refuses to complain. You have walked with gods and learned what they keep. Not thunder, not spectacle, not the luxury of being right alone. They keep schedules. They keep tables. They keep each other from mistaking appetite for law. And when power tries to arrive late wearing old costumes, they meet it not with drums but with the quiet of practiced rooms. Now, set your palm flat on the cool sill. Let the night shorten sentence by sentence. Let the wheel turn without you pushing. The bargain will keep while you sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.